Chapter 9. Temari eyeballed her date from across the table, totally oblivious to the rest of her surroundings. Naruto slowly chewed his food, trying to draw out a little more time before she began to bombard him with questions. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw her assume her cute, pouting pose as he dubbed it. She leaned both elbows on the table and rested her chin on her cradled fingers, while smiling sweetly and batting her eyelashes. She didn't say a word, but Naruto sighed and sat his fork down. You know, you're getting really good at begging like that. Perhaps we should transfer you to the interrogation department. No prisoner would be able to withstand that pouty look. She grinned and closed her eyes. I know. Now how about you tell me why there's an oversized rat in my family's home? He took a deep breath and pushed his plate away. This might take a while. As you know, his name is Sanzoku and he's a red panda. I signed the raccoon contract earlier today and became the first summoner for them in hundreds of years. They had their reasons for contacting me, but I won't tell you yet. I'd rather show you. When? Tonight. All right. So how have you enjoyed your first year here in Suna? Naruto smiled and took a sip of his iced tea. Temari, I love it here. This place has become my home more than Konoha ever will be. I love you guys. You treat me like a human being instead of a disease. It's a little dusty, but I can live with that. How about your class? How are they coming along? You should know. You hang out and watch whenever you're not on a mission. The class is great, those kids have talent, some more so than others. But they're all coming along nicely. They all have the basics down to a science. So? What are you going to teach them this year? Naruto rubbed his chin and sat back in his chair. I think I'll teach them a few low-powered jutsus. I'm going to request a taijutsu expert come by and a genjutsu expert as well. I'm not very proficient in either of those. While I've come a long way in a year, my taijutsu is still abysmal compared to Lee's. Everyone's is abysmal compared to Lee's. Yeah, true, but my genjutsu ability is simply nil. I don't have any talent in it and these kids need every advantage they can get in the ninja world. If I can't give it to them, it's my responsibility to make sure that they get that education. Uzumaki Naruto, the poster boy school teacher. Never thought I'd live to see it become a reality. Me either. I mean, me, a school teacher. Who'da thunk it, you know? So when are Tsunade and Jiraiya going to visit? They still don't know yet, but they're going to bring some of my friends with them to visit. Knowing Tsunade, it'll be a surprise visit so she can see the look on my face. Now enough about me, how about you? How's your past year been? Temari cupped her cheeks with her hands and leaned on the table again. It's been pretty good. I've got a gourmet chef as a roommate and he's also a pretty good masseuse. My year was kind of routine except for when I hang out with him. I always have fun around him, but he keeps dating other women. Naruto grinned at the not-so-subtle jabs. Before he moved to Suna, he never would have taken Temari as a jealous person. Well, maybe this guy does that because a certain sandy blonde told him to date other women. Temari put on her own grin, hers a little more vicious. And maybe that guy should read underneath a little better. When a woman tells you to date other people, that's not what you're supposed to do. But this guy doesn't know any better, I'll bet. He just likes to have fun. Besides, he always comes back to his roommate, doesn't he? Yes, and he's a sweet guy, but it's like he doesn't notice me. Naruto frowned and sat his drink back down. Now Temari, you know that isn't true. Yeah, but I always have to make the first move. If this keeps up, it'll ruin the surprise I have for her. Temari, you know none of that is true. Now, we're almost through and I have a surprise for you. You can ask me one more question and then we'll leave, okay? She nodded and thought hard. As if struck by inspiration, she looked at him with bright eyes. What is the green? Naruto was taken aback by her abruptness and his mind fumbled for an answer. He hadn't expected that. Where did you read about the green? She blushed slightly and fidgeted in her seat. Well, to be honest, I didn't read anything about it. I kind of got bored waiting for you and flipped through one of your scrolls, but I didn't understand anything in it. What is the green? Naruto sighed and stood, offering his hand to Temari. It's better for me to show you. It's all part of what I was planning to do with you tonight. She couldn't even guess what that encompassed. As they walked, Naruto looked up into the sky. A full moon was out and he could make out the figure of Gaara on top of the Kazekage Tower. Old habits die hard. After all, he waved to the gate guards and kept close to the walls of Suna as they trekked to his land. Naruto, where are we going? Remember all those months ago when I asked Gaara for a plot of land? Yeah, so? Oh, he gave you one. Yup. I'm taking you to see it. Temari cocked an eyebrow and squeezed his arm tighter. If you've seen one sand dune, you've seen them all. No offense, but all the property in Suna is the same. Not mine. I plan to build a house here soon. Trust me when I say you've never seen a dune like this before. Hey, I can show you something else I've been working on. I found these seals in Dad's scrolls and tried them out. They work great. He lifted his pants legs and shirt sleeves to reveal seals drawn on pads under his clothing. She cocked her head to the side and looked at him quizzically. What do they do? You've heard of gravity seals, correct? Yeah, they increase the gravity field around the wearer and help build muscle. Are those gravity seals? Nope. Then what are they? Resistance seals. Temari stood upright and put her hands on her hips. Go on. Resistance seals are great for wind users. Instead of weighing the user down, like gravity seals, they create a pocket of air behind the user like a parachute that restricts movement and forces the user to put more effort into moving around. Kind of like gravity seals, but without the excess force on the bones. This promotes muscle growth and helps your wind affinity at the same time. Temari eyed him hungrily. She was always willing to learn more wind manipulation. Can you make me some? Of course. That was going to be part of my present to you, but now that the cat's out of the bag, Naruto formed a hand sign and the seals glowed for a moment before fading back to black ink. He grinned and scooped Temari onto his back. Now hold on tight. I'm going to show you the result of over 6 months of resistance training. Temari nearly fell off when he shot across the desert, a cascade of sand rising behind him. She squealed with excitement when he leapt into the air and did a somersault. She was never more glad that she had wore panties, even if they were alone in the desert. Someone could have gotten quite an eyeful. Naruto grinned as he felt her grip on his neck tighten. He enjoyed moments like these with her. The feel of her breath on his neck, her hair tickling his ear. He could do without her banshee shriek at the moment, but she was having fun. He could deal with it. The sight of his wall came soon and he landed atop the structure with aplomb. Temari slid off his back and pulled her skirt back down before he turned around. She looked around and down into the moonlit sand inside the walls. It's just sand, Naruto. Nothing different about it at all. He smiled and put his arm around her waist. Look closer. Temari strained her eyes as hard as she could, but couldn't see anything but dirt. Naruto squeezed her hard and spoke again. Don't look at it like a civilian. Analyze it like a ninja. She frowned at him and turned an analytical eye on the expanse of dirt. Her brow furrowed when she noticed a slight shimmer and she raised her hands to make a seal, only to be stopped by Naruto. So you noticed? It's a very large genjutsu, the only one I can do. I keep it activated at all times. Don't dispel it, just come inside and see what I have done. Temari didn't say anything, just wrapped her arm around his waist as well and shivered when she felt the telltale signs of genjutsu melt away to the sight before her. It's beautiful. Temari twirled round and round, taking in everything she saw with childlike wonder. This had to be a genjutsu, it had to be. Naruto saw her trepidation and sighed. Go ahead, Temari, try to release it. I promise it won't disappear. She put her hands together shakily, the ram seal forming, and she cried out, Kai, as she closed her eyes. She kept them screwed shut, just knowing that she had ruined this wonderful illusion, but silently praying that it had been real, that it was just one more thing that the amazing young man with her could do that others couldn't. Naruto took his hands and caressed her cheeks when he saw she wasn't going to open her eyes willingly. Temari, open your eyes. It's okay. Slowly, ever so slowly, she cracked her eyes open to be met with Naruto's smiling face. He latched onto her arms and pulled her into a hug as he lowered them both to the ground. It's okay, Temari, this is all real. Just feel the grass underneath you. Temari kept her eyes glued to his as she groped the ground beneath her. Instead of sand, she grabbed a fistful of lush green grass and lifted the blades to her face, staring at them in awe. This shouldn't be possible, sure it is. Watch. Naruto snatched a blade of grass and put it to his lips, blowing on it and making a whistling sound. Temari stood and turned around. He had all kinds of flora here. Trees of all kinds, bearing fruit, bushes with berries, lush, green grass. It looked beautiful in the moonlight. She knelt by a small stream running through the middle and cupped some water in her hands. It tasted so sweet and cool. Naruto, how did you do this? I harnessed the green. What is it? Naruto walked over to a tree and sat down, leaning against it. He motioned for Temari to join him and she sat down between his legs, her back to him. She moaned when she felt him begin to massage her sore neck. Naruto knew how much she had been wanting a neck rub and decided to kill two birds with one stone. He only hoped that she would pay attention. He didn't want to have to explain this twice. Okay, you listening? Good. Now then, the green is a force that doesn't follow any laws of jutsus. It isn't a jutsu per se, it is instead an ancient energy force that drives nature's need to grow. I don't know everything about it, but from what I know, it is extremely picky about who wields it, and several who have tried without its blessing have either been driven mad or have died at its behest. Get all that? All right. I began to experiment with it a little over 9 months ago, small things at first. Just grass, flowers, a couple small bushes. As time went on and I became more proficient in it, I was able to use more and more until I covered the entire plot that I was given. So what do you think? It's beautiful, but what about a water supply? How do you maintain a creek through here without it drying up? Underground springs and river. I spent a lot of time rerouting them to run underneath the property. The creek is fed by a spring in a cave up the hill. It's actually a very mystical place. I'll have to show it to you in the daylight. Why only the daylight? Because it's a crystallized cave. Prisms throw light and color everywhere. Temari formed her mouth in a silent "oh" and resumed enjoying her neck rub. The boy had really skilled hands, so what are you planning to do now? Will you show Gaara? Of course. I'm bringing you, him, and Kankuro out here tomorrow. If he likes it, I'll see if he wants me to start on other parts of Suna. Why wouldn't he? Naruto shrugged and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. Because Temari, I've found in my short life that some people refuse to let go of the past, even when something better is right in front of them, representing the future. It's the reason Gaara and I were hated for so long, it's the reason change is hard to accept. Ignorance is the harbinger of destruction. But it's so beautiful. Why wouldn't anyone want life in the desert? We could make Suna into an oasis, but Suna has been like this for decades, and they might like their home. It might be dreary, it might be windy, and it might be sandy, but it is their home, and to mess with one's home is to insult them. I won't do that without permission. Will you at least allow the rest of Suna to see your accomplishment? Naruto smiled and squeezed her again. Of course. I'll have Gaara take down the wall soon. She sighed and leaned into his embrace. How do you manage to do all these amazing things without anyone ever finding out? I'm just awesome like that. They sat and listened to the wind rustle the tree leaves for several minutes, enjoying each other's company. Temari, despite her excited disposition, couldn't help but start to nod off while being held in his warm embrace. Hey Temari? What would you say if I wanted to be with you? Her eyes popped open wide and she spun in his arms to face him. Her voice was hopeful as she gazed into his eyes. Do you really mean that? And if I do? She jerked forward and captured his lips with hers. She'd kissed him several times, but none had ever sent a chill down her spine like this one. When she finally released him, she sat back and watched the starbursts disappear from her eyes. Suddenly, an unfamiliar weight settled in her hair and she reached up to pluck out a Kate Jessamine, her favorite flower, not at all a native bud to Suna. She looked up at him and smiled. How? He merely put his hand on the ground and she watched in fascination as a small bush burst from the ground, bearing 3 more of the white flowers. He placed one in each ponytail and leant back against his tree. She melted into his chest and let out a happy sigh. This has been one of the happiest nights of my life, Naruto. Thank you for this. I'm just glad I got to share it with you, Temari. They laid there for a while longer until Naruto noticed her eyes drooping more and more. He picked her up bridal style and leapt over the wall to go back into Suna. Temari shifted in his arms and yawned. Happy anniversary, Naruto. Naruto and Temari had gotten home late that night and as such, were nearly late for their meeting with Gaara the next morning. As they rushed through the streets, Temari berated her new boyfriend. They stopped right outside the tower, where she continued lambasting him. We should have gone home after our date, but no, you just had to be romantic and ask me if we could go steady in a beautiful place. This is your fault. Hey, I didn't hear you complaining last night, princess. In fact, let's go over who was acting more lovey-dovey back at my property, you or me. Temari growled as she opened the door to Gaara's office. A loud harumph from Kankuro brought the two out of their squabble and Gaara motioned for them to take a seat. Now that the two lovebirds are here, we can begin a meeting, that those who were late requested. What is this all about? Naruto straightened himself up and sat the red bundle around his neck on Gaara's desk. Gaara and Kankuro wondered what the hell it could be as it slowly unwound itself while Naruto spoke. I acquired the raccoon contract for Suna. Their leader, Tsubasa, wanted me as their summoner and I agreed. This is my personal summon, Sanzoku. Yo. The little red panda waved his hand merrily to the brothers and Kankuro nearly died laughing at the look on Gaara's face. The Kazekage, despite sleeping well now, still retained his Jinchuriki marks and he was not amused by the creature in front of him. Are you making fun of me, Naruto? What? No. This is serious. Suna has a new summoning contract. Raccoons, Gaara, raccoons. They'll be able to help us in all kinds of ways. Gaara still did not look amused. As one who used to hold a demonic tanuki, I would have expected these furballs to be loyal to me. Why did they choose you? I dunno. I'm awesome, I guess. It's because he is able to help us. Kind of a I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine kind of thing. See? Now that makes more sense. Naruto grumbled to himself while Temari took over. Gaara, he has something else to show you. It'll change the way we live in Suna. Kankuro snorted. He knew never to count Naruto out when it came to surprises, but that didn't mean he wouldn't get any jabs in. What's he done now? Invented ways to skin summons for fur coats? A quick bite on the hand from Sanzoku let him know that such humor was not appreciated. Kankuro grabbed his hand while Temari scowled at him. No, this is big, really big. Naruto has done something that will blow your mind. He showed me last night after our date. Why after your date? You two an item now? Temari blushed and turned her face down slightly while Naruto grinned and threw an arm around her shoulder. Yep, now hurry up. I want to show you two my secret project. Before he could even grin at his own comment, he was shoved against the wall by a hand of sand and one of Kankuro's puppets held a blade against his genitals. Naruto scowled and bared his teeth at the two as they walked slowly toward him. Temari had her face hidden behind her hands. Those two did this to every potential boyfriend, Naruto. You are not to overstep your boundaries with my sister. What she says goes? Are we clear? Yeah, Naruto. If we find out you've been treating her wrong, I'll castrate you in the most painful way imaginable. You got that? Naruto just glared at the two. While he appreciated the concern on behalf of Temari, these two were his friends and he didn't expect them to act like this. Sanzoku. Right. The two brothers turned slowly when they heard the deep growling behind them and found a grizzly-sized red panda baring its fangs at them. Kankuro backed away quickly while Gaara let his sand fall. Naruto brushed himself off and waved his hand to Sanzoku, who shrank back to his small form. Naruto grinned and threw his arms around Gaara and Kankuro's necks. "Now guys, I'm glad that you're so protective of Temari, but seriously, I'm your friend and I thought better of the two of you than that. You know that I treat her like a queen, so don't do that again." He pointed downwards with his eyes and the brothers glanced down to find themselves on the receiving end of two kunai to the genitals, held by grinning Naruto clones. "I'd really hate to take away your ability to have children, before you ever get started." Kankuro gulped while Gaara impassively hit the clone holding him hostage over the head with a fist of sand and walked to the door. He held it open and quirked an eyebrow. "Now that the excitement is over, shall we go see what Naruto has planned for us?" Naruto led them down an alley that dead-ended at the outer wall of Suna. Kankuro and Gaara each raised an eyebrow and turned to the two blondes. Naruto grinned and pointed to the wall. "Use your sand to drill a human-sized hole in the wall, Gaara." "I'd use Rasengan, but I don't want to take out the whole wall." Gaara nodded and formed a drill with his sand and began chipping away at the ancient wall. The others stood back and waited for the dust to settle before they saw Gaara's odd visage. For once in his life, the Kazekage was taken aback by a surprise that didn't happen in a fight. "Everything is so green." Naruto and Temari smiled as they watched Gaara and Kankuro explore the expansion of trees and shrubs. Kankuro lifted an apple from a tree and took a bite. "It's so sweet and fresh." Gaara was walking amongst the small forest with a serene smile on his face. "It's so peaceful." They both rushed back up to Naruto with excited looks on their faces. "Can you do this to the compound, Naruto? Can you do this on a Suna-wide scale?" "I think I can. There's no reason I can't." Temari had been thinking of other things while they had been in the meeting. She motioned for her brothers and boyfriend to take a seat on the grass. "Naruto, make a few clones to go get a blanket to sit on and get some lunch. We might be here a while." Naruto nodded and sent his clones off to take care of their assigned tasks while he turned back to listen if Temari had anything else to say. "All of you sit." The three men complied and Temari plopped down beside Naruto. She sighed and looked up at the sky. "I was thinking last night and this morning, after coming here, about the benefits this could bring Suna." Gaara cocked an eyebrow and folded his arms. "Such as?" "Such as economic benefits. Think about it, guys. We won't have to depend on trade for vegetables and fruits, or grains anymore. We can produce our own. With grass and hay, we can bring in livestock and have our own meat that isn't imported at an outrageous price." The others looked at her with interest. "With all this greenery comes water. Naruto has discovered at least one underground river here in Suna, and it stands to reason that he could discover more. We could be totally self-sufficient, to an extent." Kankuro wasn't so sure about all that though and voiced his doubt. "But sis, it could take years for him to convert all of Suna into a paradise. It took him a whole year to do just a few acres." Temari shrugged. "Not like we don't have time to wait. He can do it in his spare time, little by little. No one's forcing him to do it." Gaara nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. That is if the rest of Sunagakure wants the village to be covered with flora. I'd have to get a majority vote from the populace." Naruto sighed and laid back on the grass. "I'll do whatever you guys need me to do. I just want my village to be happy. At the very least I could purchase a few more acres from you and make a few orchards. I could make a pretty penny selling fruits and vegetables alone to the populace. At a reduced rate of the current trade percentage, of course." Naruto glared at Gaara and stared back at the clouds. "Of course, Gaara. I got price gouged enough when I was younger. I wouldn't even consider doing it to my own people." Temari meanwhile had drawn her knees up to her chest and was watching Sanzoku climb up various trees and get the fruits off the limbs. She was startled when a soft feeling rubbed against her leg and she looked down to find a small raccoon kit. "Well, hello, little one. How did you get out here?" Naruto leaned up to see what she had and smiled when he saw the kit. It must have been that small family that Tsubasa had said he would assign to live there, to see if the green was truly helping them. Go on and play with her, Temari. She won't hurt you. Her family lives in the caves on the hill. Temari giggled as the kit ran through her legs and rubbed against her, tickling her nerves. She caught the little ball of fur and held it down, poking its tummy, making it squeak in what she assumed was laughter. It finally ran off, back to its family, when 3 Narutos appeared with the items she had requested. The rest of the day was spent discussing the plans for what to do with Naruto's newfound power and his ability to summon. They'd all left more refreshed than when they'd come. The Sand siblings had never had a picnic on the grass before, and they rarely got to lounge in the shade of a tree. Gaara had never looked so peaceful as he slept, 2 of the raccoon kits curled on either side of him. Naruto grinned as he lay in his bed, remembering the events of the day. Sanzoku was curled up at the end of his bed, kicking his feet. Tomorrow was back to class, and he had a surprise for his students. They'd probably never tried to walk on water before. Kate Jessamines are a bush that my mother has out front of her house. They're a beautiful white flower that can grow several inches in diameter and sometimes take on a pinkish hue. I don't know what the scientific name is, or even if that is the real name, but that's what Mom calls them. And Mother knows best, or so she said. Alright, this is for one of my reviewers, who made a request. I'm sorry that I can't find the PM you sent me to name you, but this one is for you. I thought it was hilarious, and so, I have acquiesced. Enjoy this little omake. It had been little more than 4 hours since Naruto had become the summoner for the raccoons, and he had summoned several kinds already, but relatively small. He wiped his brow and stared up into the sky. He needed to get back soon to see Temari. One last time before I head in. I'm going to summon a medium-sized one before I leave. Naruto pushed the appropriate amount of chakra into the jutsu, and his voice rang out over the desert. Gaara sat in his office, reading over yet another boring proposal, when he felt a tug at the back of his mind. What the? He disappeared in a poof of smoke. Naruto was quite dismayed. It had been several seconds, and nothing had shown up yet. He was almost ready to give up, when a poof of smoke erupted under him and he was lifted a few feet in the air. He heard the sound of someone coughing and looked down into a familiar rat's nest of red hair. Red hair? Where the hell am I? What am I doing here? Gaara? The Kazekage stiffened and raised his gaze to meet the voice above him. Naruto? What are you doing? Why am I here? I don't know. I was practicing my summoning and you showed up. Gaara let out a long slow breath. Naruto, you are never to speak of this to anyone, understood? Yeah. Oh, and Naruto? Yeah? Get the hell off my shoulders. Chapter 10. Naruto hummed happily as he walked to his class. Yesterday had been, without a doubt, one of the best days of his life. He had a beautiful new girlfriend, the most gorgeous land in Suna, and a class full of spirited, willing young minds to mold. Not much could ruin his mood right now. He waved merrily to Carrie as he walked by and ignored the look of want in her eyes. He liked the woman, but she just didn't have what he wanted in a girl. She'd make some other man happy, though. Perhaps he should introduce her to Kankuro, with instructions to the man to not be himself. No one seemed to notice the red wrap on his shoulders, but then again, the Suna citizens seemed to tune out things about him that were abnormal. It was quickly made plain to them how eccentric he was when he arrived over a year ago, and they'd taken that with a grain of salt. He looked around the room and found it empty. No students had arrived yet. He was early this morning, but that gave him a chance to read the letter from Tsunade that Gaara gave to him last night. He hopped on top of the desk and crossed his legs as he tore open the envelope. A pile of letters came out and he smiled. His hand would be sore from writing to his friends tonight, but that small amount of discomfort would be worth it. He pulled a letter with somewhat sloppy writing out and read through it quickly. It was filled with well wishes and spoutings of youth from Team Guy. Miji and Tenten had each scrawled that they wished him the best of luck and hoped to see him again someday. Lee and Guy had drawn a picture of the two standing with their arms around each other's shoulders, giving the good guy pose in front of a sunset. Naruto smiled and sat the letter down. Those two were too much. Hinata had written him a very nice letter, filled with well wishes and saying how badly she missed him. Naruto sighed and looked up at the ceiling. If he had stayed in Konoha, Hinata would have been a good girl to pursue. She was kind and giving, and most importantly, tolerant of his foolishness to the point of sainthood. He truly missed her and hoped to see her again one day, if only to talk to her for a while. Her letters, besides Tsunade's, were always the most descriptive and detailed. He was happy that she was looking for love elsewhere, though she hadn't found it yet. Shino and Kiba were doing great and Kurenai-sensei was struggling to raise her child, although all the students helped her out, particularly Shikamaru. He felt it was his duty to Asuma-sensei. Ino and Chuji helped where they could, but sometimes they faltered and Ino was easily led to depression. Hinata took it upon herself to help others, and Naruto knew that his friends would all be fine under her watchful eyes. His last letter was from Tsunade, and he wondered how everything was going. With great curiosity, he whipped the paper open and began to scan the parchment. Dear Naruto, I hope that you are doing well in Suna. Gaara has said that you are turning into one of his finest academy teachers, and, though I am loath to admit it, you probably keep the little brats in line. Imagine if your parents could see you now. Uzumaki. Naruto, the teacher. Jiraiya nearly had a heart attack when he heard that, and I couldn't stop laughing for a week. You were always such a handful growing up. The council is still adamant about you coming home, but I refuse to give in. I won't let them ruin your happiness. I won't let anything else happen to you if I can stop it. Your family's home was sold off to the Hyugas in the auction, and they have since converted it into a historical landmark. Despite initial misgivings, Hinata herself has moved in and acts as the caretaker of the property, with Hayashi's blessings. I swear, that girl developed a backbone overnight after you left. Jiraiya is getting along splendidly and, although he can't write without aid anymore, he still manages to adapt. He has developed his summoning to the point of one-handed seals and gets those damn toads to write what he thinks while he peeps. I'll catch him one day. Unfortunately, Kakashi and Sakura are still sore about your leaving. We haven't heard anything from Sasuke or Team Hibi in over a year, and that, in itself, is unusual. I don't know what to think about that young man. The Akatsuki have laid low since then. Gaara and I keep up constant surveillance, but it's as if they dropped off the face of the earth. This worries me greatly. We don't know where they are or what they're doing, so watch yourself because more than likely, they're watching you. I don't know what else to say except that we all love and miss you. We want you to remember that no matter what, you are always welcome in Konoha. This will always be your home. Suna may be your residence, but you were born among the trees and water, not the desert. You can't leave that behind. I don't want you responding to this letter since we'll be visiting you in a couple of months. I want to see what you're up to with my own eyes. I want to know if you ever got a relationship off the ground. I want to see you teach. I want to hug you again. I miss you, and I'll see you soon. Love, Tsunade. P.S. The pervert sent you his newest book in the seal in the corner. Read it for his sake. Surprisingly, it's not porn, but an adventure of epic proportions. He said he's had it for a long time and recently completed it. He said he misses you too and that you're still a gaki. PSS Anko caught him peeping the other day and broke his wrist. He cried like a little girl with a skinned knee for 2 days. Naruto chuckled under his breath and folded the paper away and into his pocket. So, they were coming to visit, huh? Well, did he have a surprise for them? He wondered how Tsunade's letters always made him feel sad and happy at the same time, like they were in the room with him. His ears picked up the sound of muffled chatter and he looked up to see his class all in attendance. He'd been reading longer than he thought. He leapt off his desk, his feet echoing against the wooden floor. Beaming at his class, he prepared to blow their little minds. Good morning, class. Good morning, Naruto-sensei. We'll be taking a field trip today. Just us, none of the other classes. I have something to show you. But first, meet Sanzoku, my new summon. The little red panda hopped onto the floor beside his master and waved at the class. Hello. His poor little ears nearly bled from the squeals of the would-be kunoichi's. Tamari was glad her brother wasn't sending her to Konoha for a while. It would give her a chance to relax and kick back, and she really needed that. After returning with those letters for Naruto, she was happy to have some downtime. She had a new relationship to cultivate after all. Currently she was on her way to her boyfriend's property to spend some time in the shade, under a tree, with a good book. It had been too long since she had just relaxed. She knew that Naruto would be there soon with his class, but the place was large enough that she wouldn't be seen unless she wanted to be. As a bonus, maybe she could hear him give a speech again. She loved to listen to him talk. Temari walked down the alleyway and up to the wall where they'd entered through the day before. It appeared to be whole again, but she knew it was merely Naruto's genjutsu encompassing any open space to keep up appearances. Taking a deep breath, she pushed forward and stepped through the illusion, coming out into green splendor on the other side. She smiled as she made her way to her tree, the one where Naruto had asked her to be his. It was decidedly the most comfortable place she could find, and it held special meaning to her. She spread a blanket on the ground and flopped down on top of it, a canister of green tea and a plate of cookies beside her, and began to read her book. She was halfway through the 3rd chapter when a flash of gray caught her eye. She didn't turn her head to give away that she saw it, but her eyes cut to see what it was, and she tried not to giggle when she saw the mysterious gray spot. The raccoon kits were back and they were trying to steal the cookies off her plate without her seeing. Temari grinned as one crept forward, slowly, its bushy tail wagging in anticipation. Before it could grab a cookie and run off, Temari caught it by the scruff of the neck and held it up to her face, grinning like a maniac. "If you guys want some cookies, all you have to do is ask." The little kit was embarrassed to have been caught and tried to make itself seem smaller, but Temari took no notice and sat it in her lap before retrieving a cookie and handing it to the ball of fuzz. The kid chittered happily and began to gnaw on the treat before curling up in her lap and going to sleep. Temari giggled at its antics and continued reading her book. She was on the 5th chapter when she heard a scream and saw one of Naruto's students come flying through the hole. "Guess he's here." After prying Sanzoku away from his female students, Naruto had led the trek to his property with a befuddled class in tow. Sanzoku was perched on his shoulder, his tail frizzed out completely, and he kept darting his eyes to the girls behind them. Naruto sighed and spoke without turning. "Ladies, behave. Sanzoku isn't a pet, he's a summon. He doesn't like to be fondled." The girls sighed and gave their affirmative, and the troop continued on until they came to a familiar alleyway. Naruto turned and walked down it and stopped at the end. His students looked at him quizzically and waited for an explanation. "All right, class, listen up. What I'm about to show you is top secret. You can't tell anyone what you see here, not even your parents. I mean it. If I find out you've told anyone, you're out of my class. Understood?" The children all gulped and nodded their heads. No one wanted to be thrown out of the Uzumaki Naruto's class. Naruto smiled and clapped his hands together. "Good. Now I need a volunteer for a demonstration. You, green shirt, come here." The boy grumbled that he had a name and walked forward. As soon as he was within reach, Naruto grabbed him by the collar and pulled him up to face him. "Tell me, boy, what would happen if I were to throw you into that wall there?" The boy began to sweat and stammer. I would probably be knocked out at the very least. I might have some broken bones." Naruto grinned, his fangs visible. "Are you sure? There might be something pleasurable in that wall." "I don't think so. It looks pretty solid to me." Naruto sighed and hung his head. "I'm somewhat disappointed in all of you, but that's why I'll be bringing in a genjutsu master to help us. There is a genjutsu in this area and none of you sensed it. TSK, TSK. And as for you," Naruto threw the boy headlong into the wall and watched as he disappeared. The students all shouted that he was crazy until they saw the boy just vanish. Naruto turned to his students with a wide grin and put his hands on his hips. "All right, who's next?" Temari smirked at the bewildered look on the student's face as the boy twirled round and round. She had had the same reaction, she knew, but it was funnier watching someone else do it. One by one the students appeared and they all stood in that one spot, mesmerized by the beauty of it all. Naruto finally emerged after the last one and waved at Temari. She waved back and went back to reading her book. This was her downtime after all. Alright class, welcome to my home. This is where we'll be training sometimes. A little girl poked her hand up. Sensei, is this part of the genjutsu? Naruto laughed and plucked an apple out of a tree and threw it at her. Take a bite out of that and tell me if it's real or not. She sniffed the fruit and rolled it in her hands, before chomping down on it and smiling brightly. It's delicious. The other students broke off immediately to explore the place. Some went to the trees and began to climb them, some took a drink of the water in the creek, and some just sat in the shade, enjoying being out of the unrelenting sun. Naruto strode across the grass to Temari and sat down beside her, giving her a kiss on the cheek. Hey honey. What's with the ball of fur? Temari looked down at her lap to the snoring little kit and giggled. It tried to steal some of my cookies and I caught it. I gave it a cookie and it curled up on me and went to sleep. It's a funny little thing. Yeah, the raccoons are weird. Sanzoku is a hit with the female population of my class. I bet he is. Where's the red poof ball anyway? Hiding in the branches above us. A pear fell onto Temari's head and she glared up into the bandit eyes of Sanzoku. I'm not a poof ball, I'll have you know. I'm a red panda. We are not poofy. You are to me. Raccoons are poofy compared to weasels. They're more streamlined. We are stronger. They are faster. We use water. They use wind. It's not a fair comparison based on things such as bodies. You're still a poof ball. I don't like you. Temari stuck her tongue out at him and had it captured by Naruto. She melted into the kiss and they broke apart when a collective ew came from his students. Naruto sighed as he stood. It appears I have to begin teaching now that their curiosity is sated. I'll see you later, okay? She nodded and watched as he herded the children together. This would be interesting. Naruto cleared his throat and the students quieted down, ready for their lesson. Now listen up. I'm not telling you anything about this place, but my promise still stands. I will kick you out of my class if you tell anyone about this place. This is my sanctuary and I don't want people knowing about it yet. Why does Temari-sama know about it? Naruto grinned and stood a little straighter. Well, she's my girlfriend. She has certain rights to be here. The children stared hard at him and one of the girls squealed. You're dating Temari-sama? That is so cool. Yeah, I know, I'm great. But we have to get started. Now, how many of you have been able to walk up the wall? All but 2 raised their hands and he smiled. Very good. I'll make clones to show you water walking and you can get started. Don't worry, the clones will explain everything. You too, come here. I need to speak with you. All but the 2 children ran off to start their exercises, and Naruto folded his arms across his chest. Can the 2 of you tell me why you can't climb the wall yet? The little boy and girl merely looked at the sand. They were embarrassed that they couldn't do a simple thing. Naruto knelt down to eye level with them and rested his forearms on his knees. Look guys, we have to get you caught up. Come with me. They followed behind him slightly and heard him giggle when a girl shrieked about the water being cold. Temari cocked an eyebrow when she saw them headed her way. What do you need, Naruto? I need your help for a moment. These 2 are having trouble with chakra control and I want you to help me find what they're doing wrong so I can help them. She grinned up at him and he rolled his eyes. And what do I get out of this? I'll make your favorite dinner tonight, along with whatever dessert you want. And I'll have a surprise for you afterward. Now help, please? She nodded her head and stood to face the 2 students with a raccoon kit perched on top of her head. She noticed Naruto's mouth rippling back and forth and asked what his problem was. Nothing. Continue on. She gave her lecture on control and watched as the 2 students ran up the trees, correcting them as she went. Naruto kept snickering and she couldn't for the life of her imagine why. She was being serious here. Once the kids were straightened out and could perform the exercise to a satisfactory level, she turned back to her boyfriend and put her hands on her hips. Just what the hell are you giggling about? Naruto's answer was to kiss her deeply, and she felt a weight lift off her head. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself staring into the blinking eyes of a raccoon kit. Was that on my head? Naruto just snickered and sat the kit back on top of her head and smirked when it snuggled its way back into her golden locks. Temari quirked an eyebrow before giggling along with him. I always knew I had soft hair, but not that soft. Well, it is very enjoyable. We'll come here tonight to eat and I'll show you that surprise I promised you. Temari nodded and went back to reading her book, the kit still curled up on her head. She silently wondered if this is what that Kiba brat looked like all those years ago. Naruto whistled happily as he ushered his tired students back into the classroom. They had done well for their first day of water walking and he'd let them dry out on the grass before taking them back to the school. A good thing too, since the rest of the teachers looked at him suspiciously. He didn't want his secret out yet. Once class was over, he trudged home and flopped onto the couch, Sanzoku lazing about on the back of it. He reached up and poked the red panda in the forehead. What? Do you think I'm doing good here? Am I coming along all right? You've only begun your journey, Naruto. We still have a long way to go here. Just remember to watch out for those Akatsuki guys. They sound like trouble. You have no idea. Well, guess I better get supper started. Temari probably wants to eat and have her belly rubbed. Sanzoku snorted and rolled to his back. Your woman sounds like a canid. We love to have our bellies rubbed. She just likes rubs, period. The girl loves any kind of massage. Without another thought, he rose and began making her favorite dish and dessert. Kankuro, unfortunately, wouldn't get any chocolate cake, but his sister would take care of any of the remains. Temari walked up behind him as he was putting everything in the basket and wrapped her arms around his waist. We eating out tonight? MMHMM. I want to eat at the property tonight. I guess that's okay. What about Kankuro? Naruto raised an eyebrow and smirked. He can eat takeout in the village. It's all about you and me tonight. She smiled and went to grab her blanket. They might be out there a while. Naruto flapped the blanket out on the ground and watched as Temari began to take the food out and distribute it. He sighed happily and grabbed a bowl. He really needed to teach her to cook so he could enjoy eating something she made. Temari was totally inept when it came to the culinary arts. They made small talk as they ate, watching the small family of raccoons play by the stream, and laughed as the kits played a game of chase. It was such a wonder, this small piece of heaven in the middle of the desert, and Temari wondered every day when she woke up how she ended up with Naruto. Her thoughts wandered back over the years, and when Naruto began rubbing her back, she let her body and mind drift in separate directions. She remembered when she first saw him and nearly puked when she recalled thinking the Uchiha was cute. She remembered his fight with Gaara and how odd she was that he stood up to her brother even though he was petrified of him. She remembered his speech after he defeated Gaara, and how he crawled along the ground on his belly just to prove a point. She remembered seeing him in the hospital after he fought Sasuke and how, even after a fight that should have killed him several times over, he was ready to go in a couple days. She remembered when she found out his dark secret, that he was a Jinchuriki and all he wanted to do was save everyone. She was saddened when she recalled that back then, he thought he was supposed to sacrifice his happiness for everyone else. But now he had come to her and she to him, and everything would be fine. Neither of them had to be lonely anymore. They had each other and they always would. She whined when she felt his hands leave her shoulders and he pulled her to her feet. Naruto looked up at the full moon and smiled. He couldn't show her in the day, but it might be prettier at night. Come on, I want to show you the surprise. As they walked toward the hillside, Temari wondered what it could be when she remembered him saying the cave was prismatic. But prisms required light and it was dark out. She voiced her concern and Naruto chuckled. And since when has anything involved with me ever gone with the stream of normality? Trust me. Before they cropped the hilltop to enter the caves, Naruto slipped his hitayate over her eyes and wrapped his arm around her waist. I don't want you seeing this until we get in there. She stumbled a bit, but since he held on to her waist she never fell. The sound soon gave way to smoothness, and she could hear the sound of trickling water resounding off the walls. She felt Naruto squeeze her and thought they must be where he wanted to be. "Can I take off the blindfold now?" "Of course. You'll want to see this." As soon as she whipped the headband off, her breath caught in her throat and she took in the sight with pure rapture. The crystallized caves were beautiful, resonating with every color of the spectrum. The hues and shades were everywhere and she spun round and round to take it all in. "It's gorgeous. I'm glad you like it. These are caves that are sacred to the raccoon tribe and it is part of my pact with them that I will keep them safe." "Why are they sacred?" Naruto shrugged and gave her a foxy grin. "I don't know. Maybe the furballs just like shiny things." "I'm not a raccoon." Temari giggled and wrapped him in an embrace, inhaling his scent as she leaned against his chest. She looked up at him and batted her eyelashes. "Can we sleep here tonight?" "I want to sleep under the stars." "Of course we can. We'll have to get up early though." "You will." "I don't have any business for a while. I'm off duty." "Lucky." As they lay on the blanket beside each other, Temari snuggled further into Naruto's side, drinking up that otherworldly warmth of his. She was glad she had worn her long robe since the desert was cold at night, but beside Naruto it didn't seem to matter. When she asked about the heat he emitted, he had shrugged. She seemed to get that a lot. Temari cracked her eyes open when she heard something go poof and saw that a clone had dispelled beside them. She was about to ask what it had been about when another blanket descended on top of them and Naruto further wrapped his arms around her. She nuzzled her head further into his chest, trying to burrow into him. She felt so drowsy around him like this, like his body emitted a natural tranquilizer for her. She was about to fall asleep when she heard him begin to softly sing to the green around them. She closed her eyes and listened to his voice. It got better every time she heard it. "From underneath the trees, we watch the sky, confusing stars for satellites. I never dreamed that you'd be mine, but here we are. We're here tonight, singing amen. I'm alive singing amen. I'm alive if everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone loved and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, then we'd see the day when nobody died, and I'm singing amen. I'm alive amen. Amen. I'm alive, and in the air the fireflies are only light in paradise will show the world they were wrong and teach all to sing along singing amen. I'm alive singing amen. I'm alive. Temari's eyes were almost closed and she could swear she felt the earth pulsating beneath her, as if it was happy with the song. If everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone loved and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, then we'd see the day when nobody died. If everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone loved and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, then we'd see the day when nobody died. And as we lie beneath the stars, we realize how small we are. If they could love like you and me, imagine what the world could be. Temari smiled as she allowed sleep to claim her. If only everyone could love like her and Naruto. If everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone loved and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, then we'd see the day when nobody died. If everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone loved and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, then we'd see the day when nobody died. 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 Naruto turned to Temari's lightly snoring form and kissed her on the cheek before closing his eyes. "I hope that was to your liking. I have to get permission from Gaara before I can take you any further, but harmony is nature in music, and all I can supply at the moment is music." He felt that little tickle in the back of his mind and the hum of the force he was allowed to command. It seems that music could soothe anything. Those of the raccoon tribe sat and watched as several more plants budded in the ground, the greens thanks to Naruto for his work. Sanzoku put it best. The boy was born for this kind of work. Chapter 11. The small group of Konoha ninjas were very thankful that the walls of Suna had finally come into view. It was a 3-day travel to the country at a moderate pace, and they were all ready for a soft bed and hot food. Tsunade turned to her followers and smiled. All of Naruto's friends had insisted on coming. All of Team 10, Team 8, Team Guy, and Irika had come along. Jiraiya and Shizune were behind her, talking between themselves about their favorite blonde. Kakashi and Sakura had not wanted to come, but Tsunade had told them they would come willingly or spend the entire time in the hospital while she was away. For Sakura, that could mean one of two things, for Kakashi it meant only one thing. So they had begrudgingly come along. The guards at the wall saw them coming and smiled. It wasn't often they got visits from allies, being one of the more out-of-the-way villages. "Welcome to Suna. May we see your passports please and reason for visiting?" Tsunade nodded and produced all their paperwork. She would have done her infamous finger flick to the forehead, but she had to be diplomatic nowadays. Besides, Naruto might not like it if she attacked his people. Her mood dropped slightly when she thought of that. Konoha was no longer his people. But then again, Naruto had never truly been Konoha's when they didn't want him. The guards gave the passports the once-over and handed them back. Tsunade took a step forward but was stopped by a raised hand. "Reason for visiting? You don't have a scheduled visit planned and Kazekage-sama was not informed of your coming. We've come to visit a former leaf ninja who joined your ranks." The guards looked confused for a moment before the lights seemed to come on and they smiled brightly. "Uzumaki-sama? Yes, he's at the academy teaching right now. He has done very well here over the past year." Tsunade smiled and nodded her head, happy with the report. As they walked into the city, the guards called out to them again. "Be sure to visit the Kazekage first, please. He'll take you to Uzumaki-sama personally." Tsunade just waved her hand and led the group to the Kage Tower. Gaara had been having a typical morning, looking over documents, signing where necessary, and sipping tea in between. Life in Suna had become a bit more hectic once Naruto's experiment was revealed to the public. It was about a half-and-half affair. Some wanted the green, others wanted to retain their heritage as the village of sand. Gaara had decided to compromise. He had commissioned Naruto to make several parks around the city and to start on some farms later in the year, around the planting time. This appeased most. The richer denizens of Suna had demanded that Naruto use the green to make their homes more beautiful and had gone away somewhat angry and more frightened. Naruto did not take to being bullied just because someone thought they were better than everyone else. If you want your land to be green simply for your own selfish reasons, then you had best get used to seeing sand forever. I have no intentions of helping only those who have the power and money. Gaara chuckled at that memory. Suna's small council had demanded that he make Naruto use his powers for the good of Suna, and Gaara had let out a small amount of killing intent to make his point clear. Naruto's power will not be used for such petty purposes. His goal is to help Suna as a whole, not her noble subjects. Then I suppose you might tell us why Uzumaki's property is a veritable paradise in the middle of the desert? That seems like he is keeping the power for himself. Gaara had not been amused and let them know as such. Naruto has responsibilities to his new summons and will do as he must. This village will flourish with his help, and I won't have that sabotaged by narrow-minded, power-hungry fools like you. This council can and will be disbanded if this foolishness is pursued. Am I clear? The council had left with its tail between its legs, knowing that they couldn't go against a former Jinchuriki and a present one at the same time. They'd be wiped out. Not to mention the rest of their little family. Gaara rubbed his eyes and thought about how the citizens had reacted. Naruto had had the wall separating his land from Suna torn down slightly so they could explore. The children had been so happy, running through the grass, playing in the stream, lazing about in the sun. The adults had sampled the fruits, finding them sweet and tasty. Some had started toward the caves, but were stopped by Naruto. "Those caves are sacred. Please don't enter them. My summons would not appreciate it." To prove his point, he had summoned Tsubasa, and the raccoon had spoken as gently as a giant animal with a booming voice could. "We are here to serve Naruto and, by proxy, Tsunagakure. We will help your village to prosper again and ask only that you respect our wishes and not enter our sanctuary without permission." His request was met with respect and a little fear. After all, his teeth were very imposing and he could have squished everyone there. Naruto had since been helping Suna little by little in his spare time. He started with a park in the middle of the city and had the raccoons help him bring forth a spring and form a small pond. He left the rest of the park shaping to the citizens, and was happy when they converted it into a peaceful spot. Benches for sitting, swings hung from branches, some had even gone to Kiri and brought back fish to put in the pond and the waters of Naruto's creek. He'd thanked them profusely. But what the park was most used for was meditation by the people. Shade was a commodity in Suna, and being able to meditate in comfort outside was a blessing. He had gone from there to the poorer districts of Suna, helping them erect small vegetable gardens and giving them directions on how to care for them. Most of the poor families had thanked him while bowing over and had asked why he would do this for them. Naruto had smiled and bowed in return. "You're my people now, and you need my help. I'll always help if I can." Those small gardens were flourishing, and the families had been able to use the money saved for other things, such as fixing up dilapidated homes and purchasing better clothing for their children. He'd relegated himself to getting them off the ground before moving on to larger projects, such as farms. That could come later. Gaara was worried that his friend was stretching himself too thin and had ordered him not to use the green for 1 month. Naruto had protested until Gaara had pinned him to the wall with sand and sighed. "As much as I hate to pull the rank card here, Naruto, you are a shinobi under my command, and I order you to cease your extracurricular activities until I say otherwise." He shook his head at that particular memory. Naruto hadn't spoken to him for 2 days afterward. He got over it quickly though, and instead began to enjoy the small vacation from the green. Gaara was sure the raccoons enjoyed it as well. Naruto had been running them into the ground, literally, in a search for water under the sands. Naruto's smartass familiar, Sanzoku, had flopped over at one time. "No more, boss. Just go on without me." "I'm so tired," a bit overdramatic, yes, but it got Naruto to lay off for a while. Gaara chuckled at the thought of the strange red panda when he heard a knock at his door. "Yes?" "Kazekage-sama, some Konoha ninjas are here to see you." "Send them in." His eyes widened slightly when Tsunade and Jiraiya strolled in first, followed by all of Naruto's old friends. He stood and addressed them. "Welcome to Suna, Hokage-sama. To what do we owe the honor?" "No need to be formal, Kazekage-sama. We're here to visit Naruto. But first, we'd like to hear how he's doing." Gaara smirked, slightly scaring the Konoha ninjas, and beckoned for them to sit, while he called for Kankuro and Temari. He turned back to the 2 Sannin. "This might take a while." "Sake?" Their nods couldn't have been more enthusiastic. Temari sighed as she stood beside her brother, listening to him tell the Konoha nins about her boyfriend. Her thoughts began to wander as she grew bored. She had wanted to try to catch one of Naruto's lectures today, but that might not be possible. Since she was essentially on vacation, she had spent most of her time at the property, just whiling the day away, reading a book or, once the wall was put back up, lounging on the grass getting a tan. She had nearly been mortified when Naruto had walked up on her one time as she lay topless on the grass. But embarrassment soon turned to arousal when she saw the effect she had on him. Temari was sure in her abilities as a kunoichi. She was deadly, she was efficient, she took no mercy. She'd been told she was beautiful before, but had brushed it off until Naruto had told her she was beautiful. She'd been told she had a perfect body before, but had scoffed until Naruto had told her that she was perfect. She'd never really thought of herself as sexy until she caught sight of how Naruto reacted to her nearly nude body. She was happy that she had that effect on him, happy and aroused. Her devilish side came out as she saw his pants stretch, and she rose and strode over to him, her hips swinging and her breasts held in place by crossed arms. "Like what you see?" Huh. She grinned and bounced up and down slightly, and giggled when his eyes followed her nipples. "Want to touch them?" Temari loved to tease him, and this was just one more instance of the subtle power she held over him. She moved up against him and placed her hand on his chest, her breasts pressed against him, and locked a leg behind his, rubbing up and down. "Or do you want to touch something else?" She laughed hard as she got dressed and dragged her now unconscious boyfriend over to the shade and placed his head in her lap while she stroked his hair. He hadn't gotten a nosebleed, he hadn't had perverted thoughts. Naruto was an admitted pervert in private, and being around Jiraiya pretty much destroyed his inhibitions. But Temari knew he placed her on a high pedestal and such close contact caused him to short-circuit. He'd be fine in a little bit. She noticed that his erection still hadn't gone down and curiosity got the better of her. It wouldn't hurt to look right? Timidly, she began to pull the waist of his pants downward and her eyes widened when Jiraiya had been watching Temari space out and grinned lecherously when a small trickle of blood escaped her nose. Thinking dirty thoughts in front of others, huh? He'd have to find out what. Temari-san, you may want to wipe your nose. You have a little, Temari's eyes widened and she fished a handkerchief from one of her pockets and hastily wiped her nose. Kankuro grinned and elbowed her side, speaking a little louder than he should have. Thinking about Naruto again, huh? The Konoha ninja's necks turned so quickly that she swore she could hear the crack. She cringed and awaited the volley of questions. Immediately, she was surrounded by every female but Sakura, who hung back with one leg thrown over the other, her arms crossed over her chest. So, what's he like? Is he a good kisser? Do you like him? Is he good in bed? Temari's face grew redder and redder with every question until she finally screamed for them to shut up. I'll tell you what you want to know later, okay? How about we go see what Naruto's up to now? Everyone nodded their consent and began the trek to the academy. All the Leaf Ninjas had the same thought. He couldn't be that great an academy teacher, could he? Naruto watched as his students walked over the top of the creek, some still struggling slightly, but every one of his students were able to do it. He allowed the other teachers to use the land on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but otherwise restricted people's access. This was his private property and he didn't want people thinking they could drop in whenever they wanted. Hey boss. Naruto looked down to Sanzoku and allowed the red panda to climb his leg and settle around his neck. What's the deal? You have visitors coming. They have the leaf symbol on the Hittite. Friends of yours? Probably Tsunade and Jiraiya. They're all right. Gaara's probably with them. They probably want to see how I teach. Let's get the kids going on a lecture then, shall we? Sanzoku just nuzzled into Naruto's neck and went to sleep. Naruto clapped his hands loudly, the noise ringing out over the area, and the kids came running. He watched as they settled down and let his senses slide over the clearing. Several chakra signatures were close, and soon they entered the clearing. He cleared his throat and turned to his students, his voice raising slightly so everyone could hear. All right guys, today we're going to talk about deception and its applications as a ninja. One of the Konoha ninjas snickered and was promptly elbowed in the gut by Temari. She wasn't going to miss one of his lectures because of some dumbass. Deception is one of a ninja's greatest tools to use. With it, you can change the tide of battle in your favor or convince someone to help you. Deception is part of our trade. We are taught to deceive our enemies, but what about our friends and family? Everyone perked up and listened intently. Deception of one's enemies is acceptable, because they are not of your village and therefore, you owe them nothing. False information is dealt like candy in the ninja world and learning to be convincing is a plus. A good poker face can save your life and the life of your comrades. Sadly, some people never learn how to gamble wisely. Tsunade growled at the obvious barb in her direction. So, the brat knew they were present, huh? She barely caught Gaara's chuckle and narrowed her eyes. She'd be good for now. But deceiving your teammates and friends is quite another thing altogether. I spent the better half of my childhood hiding from my friends. I didn't let them know what was inside me, and I never let it be known how good I actually was. Trust was a big issue on my team, and while I wanted to trust them, I knew I never truly could. In my mind, if they knew what I held, they'd abandon me like everyone else. But I wasn't the only deceiver. I didn't know about Uchiha Sasuke's curse seal until it was too late. It was kept from me, and it nearly got me killed. For the first 12 years of my life, it was kept from me that I was a Jinchuriki. Deception kept me from knowing my purpose in life and why I was hated. Deception is a double-edged sword. Deception can be one of our greatest tools and our worst enemy. Henge is a deceptive tool that changes our appearance. Information gathering is a gamble, because you risk your life for something that may not even be true. But lies among friends, family, and teammates are unacceptable and can kill you in the long run. Lies start out small and they grow. At first, it's about how strong you are. Then it goes to how smart you are. Then it snowballs until you get into a situation where you're not prepared and the cold hard fact that you aren't strong enough or smart enough comes to the forefront and everyone you know is dead. All because you deceived them and made yourself seem better than you are. Never sell yourself short, but know your limitations. Don't deceive yourself into thinking you're ready for something you're not. If you know you aren't the one for the mission, tell your superior, and if they have any brains, they'll take your advice into account. But if you can do the mission, don't deceive yourself into believing you aren't strong enough. He stopped and turned to where the group of adult ninjas were standing, his hands in his coat pockets, his back to his students. His voice rang out clearly as he spoke and wrapped up his lecture. If you must deceive someone, deceive only your enemies and yourself. Lie to your enemies and throw them off what the truth is. Never give them what they want. If you want to lie to yourself, then tell yourself you aren't strong enough and use that as motivation to get stronger. Surpass your expectations and soon enough, you'll surpass everyone around you. Remember, look underneath the underneath, because deception can only go so far before you unearth the truth. He turned back to his students and beamed at them, showing off his fangs. Now, class is over for today. I want all of you to continue with your studies at home. Read while sitting on the ceiling. Not only will it increase your concentration, you'll surprise your family and maybe get a decent scare or two. Now get out of here. The Konoha ninjas looked on in awe at the way he handled the kids. This couldn't be their Naruto, he couldn't do anything right. This Naruto was calm, cool, collected, in control. Some hung their heads slightly. They'd let quite a gem leave their village. The students all stood and rushed past the group of adults, who watched them go. Naruto stood with his hands behind his back, watching as they finally drank in the look of his land. Tsunade walked toward him and stopped short a few feet before bringing her hands into the ram's seal and whispering, "Kai." Naruto sighed and quirked an eyebrow. Everyone does that. Tsunade opened her eyes to find the trees and gurgling stream still there and wrapped her arms around her favorite blonde. So this is what you've been up to. I see you found Kushina scrolls. Hi. The sound of shouting and laughing came from behind them and they both turned to see the Konoha ninjas running around like little kids, checking everything out. The Sand siblings strode forward slowly and Temari wound her way under Naruto's arm while wrapping her arm around his waist. Tsunade cocked an eyebrow and grinned slyly. So the pervert was right, you two are together. Of course I was right. When have I ever been wrong? Naruto laughed and clapped his sensei on the shoulder. Every day of your life, Erosenin. Jiraiya looked downtrodden for all of 2 seconds before putting on a lecherous grin. So, have you too, you know? The two blondes looked at each other quizzically until they realized what was said and turned beet red. No. And it's none of your damn business. Everyone was astounded that they had said the same thing at the same time and the rest of the ninjas gathered round to begin the question marathon. After several rounds of hugs and handshakes, Naruto sighed and looked at the sky. I'll bet you guys are hungry, 'cause I'm starving. I'll send some clones to get takeout. As the clones ran off, he sat down in the shade, with Temari by his side, and began to recount his past year. Temari hadn't realized that she had fallen asleep until she woke up stretched across the ground with her head in Naruto's lap. When he felt her stir, he helped her sit up and dusted her back off. Want some dango, or some stir-fry? You've got to be hungry. She nodded and looked across to find everyone eating while talking and laughing. Did you answer all of their questions? For the most part, yeah. Ino appeared beside them suddenly and flopped down, a bowl of stir-fry in one hand, chopsticks in the other. She pointed at Naruto's neck with her chopsticks. Hey Naruto, what's with the scarf? It isn't that cold out here. I'm not a scarf blondie. Ino shrieked and leapt away as Sanzoku yawned and stretched on Naruto's shoulder. Calm down Ino. Everyone, this is Sanzoku, my personal summon. I hold the raccoon contract now. Jiraiya perked up and sat in front of him. Really? I've never heard of a raccoon contract. Show me? I'm not proof enough? No. I've seen familiars that can talk before. I want to see him summon one. Naruto nodded and walked to a spot that was very clear before he had a great thought. Hey Jiraiya, can you still summon Bunta? The Toad Sage nodded and stood, following Naruto up and over the wall. The others leapt to the top and watched as the two stood a few hundred feet from the wall. You summoned Bunta first, okay? Jiraiya concentrated and made a few one-handed seals, before shouting, Kuchios no Jutsu. He rose atop Gamabunta and sighed when the Toad Boss began his normal rant. Jiraiya. Why have you summoned me here in this dreadful place? Hey boss. Bunta rolled his eyes down to see a waving Naruto and smiled widely. Why brat? I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Ready to resign the contract yet? Naruto's grin drooped a little and he dropped his hand. Sorry boss, but I have a new summon. I wanted you to meet him. Bunta nodded and Naruto flipped through the hand signs and soon, a large cloud of smoke erupted. When it cleared, Bunta's eyes went wide, as did everyone's. Naruto, why have you summoned me? Tsubasa, I want you to meet Gamabunta, the Toad Boss. We've met before. Hello old friend. Tsubasa Naruto left with the Jiraiya to rejoin the group, leaving the two boss summons to talk. Bunta started first. I see you've taken Naruto as your new summoner. Hi, I have. He is everything I could have dreamed of for a partner. Can he control it well? Hi, he can. Very well. Better than his mother ever could. So, you plan to help him return this place to its former glory? Hi. The two were silent for a while until Bunta started again. I wish he had not cancelled our contract. Is there any way I can convince you to get him to sign it again? No. I'm sorry Gamabunta, but he is mine now. One day, you will find another worthy of you. The old toad hung his head and sighed. Maybe. But there will never be another like that boy. Even his father didn't have the level of potential he does. I agree. And that's why I can't share him. I'm sorry. The two summons bowed to one another and disappeared in giant puffs of smoke. After everyone had gotten caught up, and accepted the notion that Naruto dealt with school children, they had all left for their hotel to rest after their trip. They all agreed to meet up the next day at the property and everyone would fill Naruto in on their time in Konoha. Tsunade wanted to talk to him in private with Jiraiya when she could and Naruto accepted. He also offered to cook for them, getting sparkly eyes from Temari and Chuji. Naruto lay in his bed in the compound and let out a heavy sigh. Tomorrow, he would have a substitute teacher watch over his class while he caught up with his friends. He knew many wanted one-on-one talks with him and all the guys had demanded a spar. No doubt, the girls would occupy Temari, trying to get any dirt they could on the couple's relationship. He looked up when he heard his door creak and saw the silhouette of Temari's hair enter the frame. Hey. Hey. Can I sleep with you tonight? Naruto quirked his eyebrow and rolled his head to look at the slumbering form of Sanzoku. My bed is somewhat preoccupied right now. If you can convince Sanzoku to leave, you can. Temari marched over to the bed and put her hands on her hips. Get lost, furball. Sanzoku never opened his eyes. It had become like a game between him and Temari to insult each other. Go fuck yourself with a barbed wire baseball bat. I'm comfortable and I ain't moving. Get your flea-ridden ass out of my spot or I'll skin you alive. Up your ass with a garden hose filled with rusty nails. Naruto sighed and lay back with his hands behind his head. He had to admit, these two were great at sarcasm. Pretty soon, the verbal banter would degenerate into physical contact. Apparently, Temari really wasn't playing around and the red panda found himself lifted by the scruff of his neck and booted out of the bedroom. Sleep on my bed tonight, you good-for-nothing fur coat. Crazy bitch. Temari sighed happily as she flopped down beside Naruto and crawled under the covers, snuggling up close to him. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder and shuddered when she kissed his neck. I thought we agreed not to do this until I got my own place. She gave him a pouty look and batted her eyelashes. Not even a little bit? Can I at least feel it? No. She growled and shucked out of her kimono before reaching over and grabbing one of his shirts off a chair. She whipped it on and turned her back to him, pulling the covers over her more. Fine. Good night then. She felt him chuckle and found herself suddenly wrapped in strong arms that pulled her back. She wiggled a bit to get comfortable and found the back of her neck kissed. Temari mewed happily and shuddered when he whispered into her ear, her eyes already drooping as she melted against his warmth. Night, Temari. I love you. Love you too. Tomorrow was going to be a hell of a day. Chapter 12. Naruto woke Temari up early so that they could get to the property before everyone else. He didn't know what they had in store for today, but he knew more questions would be asked and his friends would expect answers. Temari sidled up closer to him, his coat wrapped around her, and yawned. So what did they ask you while I was conked out yesterday? Oh, normal stuff. As Temari faded off into blissful unconsciousness, Naruto was gearing up to answer all the questions he knew were coming. His friends all gathered round in a semicircle around the tree and Naruto sighed. Let's try to keep this somewhat organized, okay? How about we start on the far end with Kiba and work our way back until your curiosity is satisfied? Tsunade smirked and folded her arms. Still in teacher mode, huh, brat? That's fine. Kiba, ask away. The Inuzuka boy grinned and looked at his blonde friend. What's with the close loser? Nice duds. Naruto chuckled and grinned back at his famed fellow. It's mostly to honor my father. But I guess a good bit of it too was that I just wanted a change. I like orange, but it was time for a change. Besides, I look a hell of a lot better now, don't I? Seems so. You look less moronic in any case. Welp, that's my question. Hinata, you're next. The shy Hyuga looked at Naruto and pushed her fingers together in her old habit. Naruto quirked an eyebrow and gave her a half-hearted frown. Hinata-chan, I thought we agreed you wouldn't do that anymore. The girl eeped and let her hands fall into her lap. Naruto smiled. She was still good old, shy Hinata. I want to know, are you happy here? All head swung to Naruto, and he leaned back further against the tree, absently stroking Temari's hair, causing her to smile slightly in her sleep. The girls all noticed and sighed. Why couldn't their guys, if they had one, be like that? I am very happy here, more so than I ever was in Konoha. Not to say I don't miss all of you, because I do, but I'm not glared at here. I'm not talked about behind my back here in a malicious manner. People don't wish for my death. I'm accepted here. The children don't run from me in fear or hate me because their parents say so. Yes, Hinata-chan, I'm happy here. Hinata smiled at him sadly, knowing it was true. No matter how much she might have liked him, he would never have continued pretending to be happy in Konoha forever. The others all looked pensive and some looked away. Tsunade and Jiraiya just hung their heads, their inability to stop the people of their village from spreading hate against the boy glaringly obvious. Shino, the next in line, seeing that everyone was becoming illogically downtrodden when they should be happy for Naruto, asked his question. I have a two-part question. Everyone perked up and Naruto looked at the bug wielder questioningly. Where did this small piece of forest come from? It's like being home in Konoha. Naruto frowned at the choice of words. It was true that his land reminded him of Konoha, but this was his home, made by him. It wasn't like being in Konoha, because this forest was his. I won't answer that yet. I'd rather show you at some point, perhaps tomorrow. Trust me, it'll blow you away when you see it. Shino, though not satisfied with the answer, nodded and pushed his glasses up slightly. Very well. My second question is, can I introduce some species of bugs here that I believe may help the environment? Of course. Just nothing destructive or that may compromise my work. Shino nodded again and sat back in a more relaxed pose beside his teammates. There was silence for a moment until Shino turned to the person beside him. I believe it is your turn, Ino. You can stop ogling Naruto now. Said Blonde blushed and shifted uncomfortably where she sat. Naruto smirked on the inside. Who would have thought Ino of all people would have thought him attractive? She finally got her nerve back up and stared him in the eye. Any chance of a date? The others all groaned and Shikamaru looked slightly peeved. Naruto snickered and shook his head. Sorry Ino, but you had several chances over the years and never gave me the time of day. I think I'll stick with Temari, thanks. Ino was visibly disappointed and sat back with her arms crossed in a huff. It wasn't often she got turned down. Most guys would give their left arms to go on a date with her. She was one of the most desirable kunoichi in Konoha. Unfortunately for her, the key word was Konoha. She elbowed Shikamaru hard in the ribs, causing him to grunt and glared at him. Your turn, bum. TCH, so troublesome. The pineapple-haired brunette sat up and turned a lazy eye to Naruto. Have you become any more intelligent over time? Naruto quirked an eyebrow and nodded. What the hell kind of question was that? Have you learned how to play shogi since you've left? Naruto nodded again. Shikamaru grinned and lay back again to stare at the clouds. Good. I challenge you to a game before we have to leave. We'll see if you've gotten better at strategy or not. When he didn't say anything else for several minutes, Chuji leaned over to his best friend and put his ear close to Shikamaru's face. He leaned back up and smiled. He fell asleep. Guess I'll ask my question now. He took another chip out of the bag he was carrying and crunched down on it. Any chance I can get you to cook a meal for me? I heard the Kazekage say you're pretty good. Sure. I like to cook. It's soothing. I'll make a smorgasbord for everyone. Chuji smiled and looked upward towards the sky, watching the clouds float by. At least he'd get a good home-cooked meal here. Tenten glared at the younger ninjas and huffed. What the hell? We're supposed to ask him questions about how he's been, not request things from him. You guys are idiots. She cut her eyes to an amused Naruto and growled. How has your training been in the past year? Learn anything new? Of course I have. I'll show you what I've learned. A pregnant pause came over them as Tenten leaned forward eagerly. Later. Her eyes bugged out and she nearly shrieked at the smug look on his face. She threw a kunai at him out of frustration, which he dodged by leaning his head sideways and then rubbing his temple against the handle. Thanks for that. It's kind of hard to scratch that spot with my hands full. You're a peach, Tenten. Lee laughed heartily at his former comrade's antics, earning him a glare from Tenten. His enthusiasm wilted, but his smile didn't. YOSH. It is good to know you have been training hard, Naruto Kun. May I challenge you to a match or two? Surely, it'll be fun. I think you'll find me quite different from our spars before. Lee grinned and pumped his fists, his flames of youth burning behind his eyes. Excellent. I cannot wait. Miji sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He'd often wondered over the years what he'd done in a past life to end up on a team with such psychotic people. I too would like a spar, Naruto. But for my question, what do you see for yourself in the future? The blonde had to stop and pause here. What did he want? A family, for one. Peace was another thing he wanted. Really and truly, Niji, I just want to live life. Have a family, raise kids, that kind of thing. That's very simplistic, Naruto. No more shooting for leader of the village? Nah. Gaara can have that. I've seen the amount of paperwork it takes. He can keep it. The Kazekage snorted from his seat beside his brother and looked up with his disinterested eyes. When I decide to step down, you are my chosen successor, just for that little comment. I won't accept. That little maniacal light shone in Gaara's eyes and his sand swirled around slightly. Who said you had a choice? Tsunade coughed into her hand and the two stopped bickering, although they still threw each other hard glares. The older blonde smiled and pointed to Irika. Your turn. The schoolteacher smiled and rubbed the back of his head. I don't want to ask too many questions in front of this many people, so I just want to learn about your teaching style later. Since you were a horrible student, I just want to know what makes you a good teacher. The party laughed at the jab at Naruto's expense and the blonde smirked at Irika. Digging for advice, sensei? I guess I could share a few tricks with you. We'll talk later. Irika nodded happily and sat back, looking expectantly at Tsunade. The Hokage grinned and elbowed Jiraiya. We have several things to talk to Naruto about in private, so I don't have any questions. Jiraiya? A perverted leer spread across the older man's face, and Naruto was immediately on guard. So brat, is she a natural blonde or what? I'm not answering that. So she is. Is she any good at things? I wouldn't know. We've never done anything other than kiss. Jiraiya spluttered and glared at his pupil. You mean to tell me that you've been with this girl over a year and still haven't done anything? You're a failure as a student. Yeah, well, nobody asked you, you perverted old bastard. And I've only been dating her for a little while. I've lived with her family for over a year. And you've never seen anything? A nipple, a curly hair, nothing? I never said that. Naruto's eyes widened when he realized what he had just admitted and slapped his hand over his face. Everyone's eyes were wide, Jiraiya's grin was firmly in place, and he felt the grains of sand on the back of his neck. Gaara, don't do anything we'll both regret. Remember what happened in your office that time? The Kazekage's eyes narrowed. What have you done with my sister? Can we please talk about this without everyone here? Hell no. I want to hear about it. Naruto glared at Kiba and growled. Shut up. You're not helping my situation here. Gaara, we'll talk later. Kankuro, put your puppets away. Jiraiya, the old pervert, perked up when he heard his name called and blanched at the vengeful grin plastered on his student's face. I'll deal with you later. Naruto turned to the last two, Sakura and Kakashi, and frowned slightly. Sakura frowned back, and he could tell that even though Kakashi looked indifferent, he was not happy. I'll speak to you two in private later. I believe we have many things to discuss, especially my leaving the leaf. The two continued to glare at him, and Naruto sighed as he turned his attention to the sound of footsteps. His clones were back with the food. He smiled and moved Temari into a more comfortable position. Well, food's here. Let's dig in. Temari sighed as they walked into her favorite clearing. She glanced toward the caves and blinked. The entrance was not there, or didn't appear to be. Naruto had put up a very strong barrier to keep humans out. It still let the raccoons in though. She looked up at the stars still in the midnight blue sky and grit her teeth. Why in the hell was she up so early again? Oh yes, her boyfriend and his need to be there to greet the others. She let Naruto lead her to their tree and sat down in front of him, curling up in his coat as he circled his arms around her waist. So, what do we do now? He smiled down at her and kissed the top of her head. Temari might be a battle-hardened kunoichi, but she loved to be held and kissed. She loved the soft stuff. It wasn't long before sleep claimed her again, and she fell asleep leaned against his chest, Naruto following her into slumber not long afterward. It was past sunup when Tsunade led the group back to Naruto's land. She had wanted to get there as soon as possible, but getting the lazy-ass ninjas up had proven quite a chore. Jiraiya had been a big help, summoning several smaller toads to wake up the ladies, causing them to scream, therefore making the boys jump out of bed thinking they were being attacked. If it hadn't been so stupid, she might have laughed. She knew that, while Naruto had been a late sleeper in his younger days, he had since become quite the early riser. That was why she had wanted to get going earlier. She'd have had more time to spend with her favorite blonde. Next time, she'd let the rest just sleep in. Tsunade stepped into the clearing and nearly awed the sight before her. The other girls weren't as subtle as her, however. Even Sakura, who had become very icy since they arrived, couldn't help but think the scene was cute. Naruto sat against the trunk of the tree, his chin resting on Temari's shoulder, while Sanzoku lay on the ground beside him. Temari wore his coat, wrapped up in it like a little girl, her head laid back against his shoulder, as they both snored away, oblivious to the group before them. If that wasn't enough for the cuteness factor of the couple, then the small raccoon kit that laid sprawled atop Temari's head, nestled into her hair, certainly set them squealing. Temari heard the faint noise, and her eyes fluttered open. She saw the assembled ninjas staring at her and gave them a small wave. Good morning. Tsunade smiled at the girl and knelt down beside her. Good morning. You know, I never thought I'd see someone this comfortable with Naruto. You two look so natural together. And what is that furry appendage on your head? Temari looked up and patted the small kid on her head, making it squeak before rolling to one side and going back to sleep. She smiled and left it there. This little fellow is one of the kids from the family that watches over the caves. He seems to have taken a liking to how my hair feels. He and his brothers and sisters do this all the time, especially when I come here to read and relax. So you spend a lot of time out here? When I'm off duty, yes. It's comforting. I hope one day to actually live here maybe. Tsunade smiled and stood upright. Live here, huh? Sounds like someone has plans for the future. Temari blushed and hid her face further, behind the collar of the coat. Well, a girl can dream, can't she? She can do more than that as long as she loves me. Good morning, everyone. Temari blushed further and buried her head inside the coat. Naruto roared with laughter and squeezed her, causing her to gasp. She re-emerged from the coat and Naruto pecked her on the lips before pulling them both into a standing position. The little kit never budged, its feet anchored onto Temari's tresses. Naruto cracked his back and neck and grinned at his friends. How about a morning run to warm things up? How about it, Lee? Lee beamed and ran up to stand beside his friend with a gleam in his eye. YOSH. A morning run. That sounds lovely. Let's make it interesting, Lee. A race to see who's faster. You and me, once around the desert, with a girl on our backs. What'd I say? The green-clad boy's eyes sparkled and he pumped his fist, nodding his head vigorously. Naruto grinned and looked for a volunteer. Now Temari will be going with me. Who's going to travel with Lee? Not many were interested in riding on the back of the beautiful green beast, but Sakura, surprisingly, stepped forward. I'll go. Lee's smile spread across his entire face and he gave Sakura his good guy pose. YOSH. With the ever-youthful Sakura on my back, I cannot lose. Naruto rolled his sleeves and pants legs up, deactivating his resistance seals. Jiraiya, being a connoisseur of seals, noticed immediately. Whatcha got their brat? A resistance seal? Who in the hell taught you to make those? That's a lost art. Gravity seals are much more popular. I know. That's why I learned how to do it from some scrolls I found. They work wonders. Jiraiya nodded and stepped back while drawing a line in the sand with his knew exactly which scrolls Naruto was talking about. Lee and Naruto stepped up to the line and bent down to receive their burdens. Lee, you'd better take those weights off. You'll need whatever advantage you can get. Lee took the weights off, letting the plates pound a hole into the ground. Temari tightened her grip on Naruto's neck and Sakura did the same to Lee. Jiraiya stepped to the side and laid down some rules. Now, you two are to run to the river country border and back. Going around the desert would take too long. You are to touch the toad that I'll summon on the other side of the border and run back as fast as you can. No funny business, no shortcuts. Understood? The two nodded and bent over some more to get into a low running stance. Jiraiya summoned a large toad and it bounded away over the sands to river country and raised his hand and dropped it. The amount of sand kicked up by the two was simply unheard of. They raised 2 new dunes in the desert at the starting point. Jiraiya stepped back beside Tsunade and spit some grit out of his mouth. That was interesting. Naruto and Lee were neck and neck most of the way to the border and neither said a word, concentrating on their race. The girls, however, were slightly more talkative. Temari. Sakura. They both screamed when the boys turned it up a notch and grabbed their necks tighter. Temari cut her eyes to the pinkette once things were back under control. Are you still pissed at Naruto for leaving the leaf? Hell yes. He had no right to leave us alone like that. My teammates have done nothing but leave me since we became a team. He shouldn't have done that. I seem to remember you saying one time that you cried and begged the Uchiha not to leave. I don't recall you doing that with Naruto. Sakura narrowed her eyes and stared ahead. No, I didn't cry when Naruto left. At least, not while he was there. I cried later. He was the one thing I could count on in life, to always be there, and then he just up and left. Sakura, his life there was hardly ideal. If anyone had a reason to leave, it was Naruto. Sasuke had it all, and he left, because he's an idiot. I can't deny that. Sasuke is an idiot. But he also has major problems. He's not right in his head. And that's just one more thing we're going to discuss between you, me, and Kakashi, Sakura. Now you two pipe down, so me and Lee can concentrate. The two kunoichi huffed and settled back in for the ride. They saw a large toad ahead wearing armor. That was their halfway point. Naruto and Lee ran up to the toad and jumped, landing their feet into the toad's belly. It grunted and looked down. What the hell? Sorry Froggy, got a race to win. Pardon me, Toad-san. I have to beat him. Using the momentum they'd built up, the two kicked off the toad and flipped in midair, landing on their feet and rushing back toward the property. As the toad disappeared, literally, Naruto turned to Lee and grinned. Sorry Lee, but this is where I win. See ya at the line. Lee watched with wide eyes as Naruto sped off, with a happily shrieking Temari on his back. Once the shock wore off, he grinned and turned to Sakura. You should hold on Sakura-chan. This could get rough. Simon, Kai. Kumon, Kai. Aiawa. Sakura's screams were lost to the wind as she nearly choked Lee. He set off after Naruto, the sand kicking up behind him in waves. The people at the finish line watched with wide eyes as twin wakes of sand bloomed out in the desert. Kiba leaned over to Hinata and Shino and asked. They can stop in time, right? Akamaru barked in response. Yeah, I don't think they can either boy. Lee pulled up beside Naruto again and grinned at the blonde. I'm sorry Naruto-kun, but it appears you still aren't up to my level of speed. Naruto grinned back at Lee and hefted Temari slightly, letting her know he was about to blow Lee away. Sorry, Lee, but I still have 2 resistance seals left. Take care now, bye-bye then. Naruto ran his hands over his thighs and felt the pocket of air behind him dissipate. His lips split into an impossible smile and the explosion of sand from his takeoff bowled Lee over, causing both him and Sakura to roll across the desert in a tangle of arms and legs, ending with her straddling him. Lee blushed and turned his head away. Sakura-chan, not that I mind, but you're kind of sitting on my. Sakura looked down between her legs and leapt up immediately, crossing her arms. She'd hoped to see Naruto humbled a tiny bit. Just take me back Lee. Lee sighed and scooped her onto his back. He wondered if he'd ever break her shell. Naruto ran full speed toward the finish line and blew by it, throwing sand over everyone. He ran straight up the wall and jumped for the creek, trying to slow his descent. Temari saw what he was doing and hollered in his ear. Don't you dare land there. Naruto. The group of Konoha ninjas heard the scream and saw the water cascade over the wall and ran to see what happened, Lee and Sakura right behind them. They found a fierce-looking Temari straddling Naruto's waist in a low section of the creek, totally soaked, and strangling her laughing boyfriend. I told you not to land there. Why in the hell did you insist on landing there? Because you're beautiful when you're wet. She let go of him and stood up in the creek, planting a foot in his stomach, knocking the air out of him, and stepped over him, before sitting down on his coat and letting the sun start to dry her out. Idiot Naruto laughed again and stood up, shaking himself and sending water spraying everywhere. Lee appeared next to him, his fist shaking. Oh, Naruto-kun, your youthfulness knows no bounds. You actually beat me in a foot race, while I had 2 gates open. You are a prime example of the springtime of youth. I shall redouble my training in order to beat you. Naruto laughed and slapped his friend on the back. That's great Lee. I look forward to our next race. Rest up and we'll have a spar before you all leave. Lee nodded and turned around to find all the Konoha ninjas, with gaping stares. He looked at them quizzically. What? Tenten stepped up and touched the 2 on the faces. Just seeing if you 2 were actually for real or not. That was amazing. The 2 grinned and Naruto nodded. Of course we're amazing. We're the Dobes, remember? We have an obligation to be amazing. The Konoha ninjas all groaned and Tsunade smacked him on the head. Idiot. Once everyone had settled down, Naruto looked at them all seriously and put his hands on his hips. Now look. I know you're all curious about how this place came to be like this. Well, I did it. Ino snorted and he looked toward her. Something you'd like to say, Ino? Yeah, I do. I grew up in a flower shop and I know that you simply can't transplant flowers and trees in an uninhabitable place like this. I don't know where you found a water source, but it isn't enough to make this much grow in just a year. Something like this would take years. Naruto nodded and put his hands behind his back. That's all correct, Ino, but it doesn't apply to me. I control the green, I can do whatever I want. The group looked confused and let Ino be their spokesperson. The green? What the hell is the green? I'll show you. Follow me. Naruto led them back over the wall and sat down just a few feet from it. He crossed his legs and clapped his hands together, seeming as if he was praying. Watch. The Konoha nines watched carefully as he seemed to glow slightly and his hair waved slightly in a non-existent breeze. Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated, calling on his unseen ally. Everyone watched with wide eyes as grass began to sprout around Naruto and flow outward toward them. Soon, it stopped just behind them and trees began to grow until they stood at full height. Flowers bloomed of every color and type and everyone watched as fruit bloomed from the trees. Naruto opened his eyes slowly and blinked, taking in the look on everyone's faces. They were a mixture of awe and elation. Ino whispered out, somewhat loudly. No way, the Shodame's power, no. She swung her head to look at Naruto and her eyes pled for an answer. What do you mean, no? It's not the Shodame's power. It's the green. It's the primal source that guides all plant life on this planet. And you control it? He nodded to her and her eyes widened again. Yes, I control it. Naruto, how do you do these things? I just find a way to do these things. I have more to show you guys, much more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But I want to see what you've all learned as well. He stood and plucked 4 gardenias and placed them in the ponytails on Temari's and arm around her shoulders. He turned to face his friends. Everyone had a startled look on their face. If he improved this much in just a year, how far had he really come? Naruto grinned at the looks on their faces. I think I'd like to spar Lee later on today, but until then, I want to talk to him, Niji, and Tenten. The rest of you go and explore the city, have fun. Just don't enter those caves I told you about. I'd hate to have to discipline you for entering sacred ground. I'll see the rest of you at lunch at the compound. The rest of the ninjas turned to walk away and gathered at the entrance that led back to Suna. Iruka turned around and told them his plan. I want to know what the people of this village think of Naruto, and I think we should start with his students. They have the most interaction with him. The others nodded and went to find the school with him. Tsunade and Jiraiya went to talk to Gaara. Naruto sat Team Guy down in the shade of a tree and looked to them. Okay guys, so what do you want to do first? The 3 looked at each other and grinned evilly. Niji answered for them. We each want to spar with you, to see how far you've come. Light contact? Tenten grinned and produced a staff from nowhere. Nah, that's boring. We prefer full contact. Naruto grinned and leapt away from them. Just how I like it. Chapter 13. Lee tried to run forward, but fell onto his backside and sprawled out on the ground. Darn, I knew I shouldn't have opened the gates for a simple race. But I wanted to impress Sakura-chan. Tenten glared at her fallen teammate and Spuna kunai by its ring. We told you not to overexert yourself while you were racing. You knew we were going to try to spar him today, but you had to be hard-headed. But it was a youthful race, Lee, just lie back and be quiet. Tenten and I will need all our concentration. Lee sighed and propped himself up against a tree. Sitting out of a fight sucked. Naruto stretched himself out a little more and readied himself for whatever they threw at him. Sanzoku, got it boss. The members of Team Guy watched with wide eyes as the small red panda grew until he was the size of a horse and then grinned at them. Been a long time since I've been in a fight. Be gentle, huh? Tenten and Niji nodded dumbly. They thought it should be the other way around. The claws on the creature were nearly as long as one of Tenten's kunai. Naruto smiled and got into a low crouch. Without warning he shot forward and threw a kick at Niji's gut. The Hyuga luckily had his Byakugan activated already and blocked the kick with his forearm. Bad idea, he realized, as Naruto's kicks were now on par with Lee's. Even blocking them hurt. Naruto used the block to pivot off to the side and launch a punch at Tenten. The girl ducked out of the way and chucked a kunai at his chest. Naruto caught it as he backflipped away and came up swinging it on his finger. Come on you two, get serious. I've spent over a year training and I want to see what you can do. Well, you haven't exactly shown us anything yet that proves you've improved. Tenten was about to respond but found herself blocking a large claw, courtesy of a red panda. You're pretty cute, you know. I'd much prefer the boss go out with someone who looks like a panda than that insane chick he's dating. But alas, let's see what you got. Tenten growled and unsealed a sword from one of her scrolls. Bring it on, furball. Sanzoku raised his hackles and growled. Now you remind me of her. He leapt toward her and they began to fight in a ball of fur and steel, curses and shrieks. Naruto grinned and formed a Rasengan in his right hand. Niji quirked an eyebrow and smirked. So you're able to make it with one hand now, huh? That still doesn't prove anything. Perhaps or maybe, as you're about to find out, it proves that I've accomplished a lot. Naruto dashed forward and thrust the sphere toward Niji, who grimaced and began the preparations for his kaiten. Naruto's grin was audible from the sky as he leapt into the air. I've always wanted to know what would happen if two spheres, traveling in opposite directions, met. Niji's eyes went wide with fear as Naruto plowed the Rasengan into the kaiten, laughing like a maniac. The resulting explosion blew them all in different directions. As Iruka and the group walked inside the classroom that Naruto usually occupied and introduced themselves to the class, they felt the shake from Naruto and Niji's explosion. Kiba grabbed the wall and looked around frantically. What the hell was that? The Konoha ninjas looked to the students and substitute for an answer and found amused faces. The substitute chuckled and shook her head. That was probably just Uzumaki-san trying out a new jutsu. Don't worry, it's a common occurrence here in Suna. Besides, his chakra signature when he does things like this is large enough that everyone feels it. Yeah, Naruto-sensei is really strong. He's always doing something like this. Iruka smiled and walked to the front of the class. He looked out over the small group and wondered what Naruto could possibly teach them. The rest of the Konoha nin stood against the wall behind him. This was Iruka's domain. Hello everyone. My name is Iruka and I was Naruto's old sensei in his academy days. These people behind me are his friends. We just want to know what Naruto is teaching you and what you think of him. The students perked up when they heard Iruka introduce himself. One of the girls raised her hand. Iruka pointed to her. So you're Iruka-sensei? I always thought you'd be bigger. Naruto-sensei talks about you all the time. He does? The girl nodded and a boy stood up. He's told us all about his time in the academy and how he was the dope of his class. He's told us all about you too, how you used to get onto him for being dumb all the time and doing stupid things. He has a lot of respect for you. Iruka beamed and sat down on the desk. Tell me what you think of Naruto. The class immediately came to life. Iruka let some of his teaching ability come back out, showing the class where Naruto had gotten his intimidation tactics from. Quiet. Haha, anyway, we'll start over here. You on the end. The boy stood and bowed. Naruto-sensei is a great teacher. He's taught us all how to do so much in just a year. We can all do henge, kawarimi, and bunshin without difficulty. And he's taught us morals and stuff like that. Sakura snorted and everyone turned to look at her. Morals? Naruto? Like what? The boy glared and straightened his backbone. No one talked bad about his teacher. He's taught us that to be a traitor is the highest crime there is. That emotions are useful in battle, but should be carefully managed. And that you should always follow your own path. He teaches us more than the leaf teaches their genin. Those are all basic skills that any ninja should know. What are you kids, 12? We're 9. We're a second-year class. Come on guys, let's show them what else Naruto-sensei has taught us. The Konoha ninjas watched with wide eyes as the students walked up the walls and stood on the ceiling with their arms crossed. That wasn't taught to second-year students in Konoha. Irika was the first to get over his shock. How long have you known how to climb walls? Since the first year. Naruto-sensei is teaching us how to walk on water as well. Irika spluttered and looked back at his former students. If this is what Naruto was bringing to Suna in regards to teaching, then Konoha had a lot of catching up to do. He didn't miss the smiles on all the ninjas' faces though. Naruto was actually a hell of a teacher. Alright, you've proven your point. You can come down now. The Suna students all flipped to the floor, landing lightly, and took their seats again. Irika smiled at them and crossed his arms. You all have no idea how proud I am of Naruto, that he could take you all this far in so little time. I think a revision of how we do things in Konoha may be in order. But that's for later. Tell me what he's been up to. One of the girls in the back stood up. Naruto-sensei has been working to make Suna greener. He's always doing something. And while we're in class, he usually has his Kage Bunshin working on reading or working on jutsus. In the evenings, he spends time with Temari-sama if she's home. The sound of the door opening was heard and everyone watched as Sakura walked out. Hinata looked at Ino and the blonde nodded, before smiling at the children. Sorry everyone. We have a bit of girl business to take care of. We'll see the rest of you at lunch, okay? The boys all nodded and Irika frowned, but put his smile back on as he turned back to the children. Let's hear some more about Naruto-sensei, huh? What the hell, Sakura? Why'd you walk out? The pinkette turned to find the blonde and brunette following her. She sighed and pushed her hair back. I don't want to hear some little brats talk about how great Naruto's life is. I didn't come here to hear about how awesome it is that he lives in Suna. Sakura, I don't know why you're acting like this, but you need to stop. Naruto wasn't happy in Konoha. He wasn't accepted in Konoha. Why begrudge him happiness? Sakura turned to Hinata and frowned. I seem to remember Sasuke not being happy in Konoha, but everyone tried to bring him back, Naruto especially. He did that for you. And I'm pretty sure that Sasuke was very well accepted in Konoha. The question is, why are you and Kakashi being so resentful of Naruto? Because he left. I don't have anyone anymore. My whole team is gone, left, just up and quit. What would you do if Kiba or Shino just up and left? Or Shikamaru and Chuji? What if they just said they weren't happy and left? Ino frowned and crossed her arms. But they aren't hated like Naruto was. They don't have a reason to leave. Damn it, Sakura, why not just accept that he isn't coming back? Why not move on? They saw the tears piling up in Sakura's eyes as she tried to hold them back. He always told me I wouldn't have to do things alone. That he'd always be there. Well, guess what? He's not there anymore and I'll never forgive him. They watched as she stomped off somewhere and Ino heard Hinata sigh. I'm not happy he left either, but Naruto deserves happiness above all of us. I don't despise him for wanting to be wanted and loved. Ino watched as Sakura faded into the heat waves and turned around to go rejoin the group, Hinata following her. They'd have to find Sakura before lunch. Me either. Tenten panted as she laid on the ground. That summon of Naruto sure could fight. It was like the thing was born for it. Hell, it had even thrown some water jutsus at her. She turned her head to find Neji and Naruto still fighting, although Neji was barely on his feet at this point. The pale-eyed man panted and settled back into his Juken stance. Where do you keep getting energy from? It's like a repeat of our match from all those years ago. What pisses me off the most is that you're just a chunin. Naruto grinned and took a step backward. Neji, you've always known I wasn't normal. and besides, Genin, Chunin, Jounin? They're just titles. I don't need to be a Jounin to beat you. Let me show you one of my favorite new jutsu that I've learned. Miji watched and prepared himself to use another katen as Naruto began to spin himself like a top. From the middle of the whirlwind, he heard the blonde's voice. This is a little jutsu known as a tornado. It's not really a jutsu at all, merely spinning fast enough to allow my wind element to infuse around me and keep the air moving. The really fun part is that it picks up the sand around me and turns this fluctuation of air into a sandblaster, capable of peeling skin off the bones. Best part? Once I get the air flowing, it's self-sustaining. No more effort needed on my part. Miji's eyes widened as he saw the tornado begin to move forward. I'd use katen if I were you, Miji. With a curse under his breath, the Hyuga began to spin furiously, actually feeling the impact as the tornado collided with his chakra shield. Tenten's and Lee's eyes widened as they felt the wind whip at them, opening small gashes in their arms and legs. Miji felt like he was inside a blender. The air pressure was incredible. But it had to end at some point. He simply had to outlast Naruto with his katen. He could do it. Naruto's eyes shone with glee. He hadn't had this much fun in forever. Miji was proving to be a formidable opponent, just as he was back then. He gave the tornado a bit more of a push and watched as Miji exploded backward, skidding along the ground before coming to rest in the creek. Naruto rushed over to him immediately and laughed when he saw Miji's blissful look as the water caressed his wounds. The Hyuga opened his eyes and let out a small chuckle. It seems, once again, you've left me laying on my back after a fight. Can we go to lunch now? I've worked up quite an appetite. Yeah, can we, Naruto? Your summon really wore me out. Rest sounds good. Yash. I, too, would like to rest. Perhaps I will feel like sparring you tomorrow. Naruto sighed as he made some clones to carry them back to the compound. Sorry, Lee, but tomorrow I'm talking to Ino, Shikamaru, and Chuji, I think. I don't know what they plan to do, but if Shikamaru wants a game, I imagine I'll be there quite a while. We'll see what I can arrange though. Lee nodded wearily as he and his teammates were carried through the streets. At least lunch would be good. And that's what's going on in Konoha, Gaara. You realize, of course, that once I tell the council of all that Naruto has accomplished here, they will demand he be sent back to Konoha. Naruto is of the sand now. I won't allow him to be sent back to a place that does not appreciate him, a place that would try to exploit him. Tsunade frowned and bit her lip. I know that, Gaara, but I'm just saying that is what they'll do. Jiraiya nodded and put in his 2 cents. The boy is the son of our greatest hero. I agree, it was stupid of the council to deny him his heritage, but they'll know he took his parents' scrolls when they hear of him using some of his father's skills. Gaara leveled a glare at the toad sage and grunted. They don't know what was in those scrolls since Naruto burned them before he left. The only jutsus of his father's they would recognize are Hiraishin and the Rasengan. Anything else would be too obscure and undocumented. It doesn't matter, Gaara. They want the Fourth's blood back in Konoha and they may get desperate to get it. I can't keep an eye on them all the time. Gaara sighed and nodded. Why, oh why, did his friend have to be such a headache, even when he wasn't present? Gaara stood and made his way toward the door. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow and turned in his seat. Where are you going? Lunch. I'm hoping Naruto is cooking for us, and I like the way he cooks. Coming? Tsunade stood and began to follow after him and Jiraiya followed her with a grunt. The boy wasn't much of a cook when we were on our trip. I guess he cultivated it after he came back. Gaara shrugged and nodded to those he passed in the street. I don't particularly care where he learned to cook. I just know he's a whole lot better than Temari or Kankuro when it comes to the culinary arts. Tsunade chuckled and waved at a few people they passed. She elbowed Jiraiya when she saw him leering at some girls. I guess some things change. I miss him, you know. Konoha isn't the same without him. I'm sure it isn't. Things are much less quiet here now that the public knows what he can do. He's going to attempt to start farms soon, you know. Tsunade smiled, but on the inside she was calculating. Konoha was a big supplier of Suna's vegetable and fruit crops. If Naruto succeeded, then that would cut into their supply lines and profits. Jiraiya noticed how she got quiet and placed his hand on her shoulder. Don't think about business right now, Tsunade. You're here to visit, not worry about economic growth. She gave him a curious look and her lips quirked downward. How did you know what I was thinking? I've been around you long enough to know what you're thinking by your body language. Don't think about things like that. Besides, it'll take quite a while before he could have fully functioning farms. Gaara chuckled as they reached the gates of his home and he pushed them open, allowing the other two inside first. It wouldn't take as long as you think. Naruto has become quite proficient with the green. He can adapt several acres into pastureland in one day. The only thing that stops him is that he has to search for a water source that can support farms of a good size. It's been slow going. Tsunade nodded her head, pleased to gain a little further insight into her favorite blonde's power. So that's why all of Suna doesn't look like Konoha. No, that's because Suna took a vote and we wanted to keep our heritage. We're the village hidden in the sand. My people voted to only make parts of the village green. It was Naruto's idea to run a small river through the city and then branch several creeks off the side of it. Jiraiya perked up when he heard that. Moving water required the use of a jutsu to make it bend to your will in so little time. Men alone couldn't do it. So Naruto can control water as well? No, his summons control water to a frightening degree. That red panda of his is very good at it as well, though not as well as the king of the raccoons. Gaara trailed off as a screeching voice floated through the air. Damn it, Chuji. Give me that pot. Naruto made enough stew for everyone. Don't be such a pig. Back off, Ino. He'll make more. This pot is mine. Tsunade slapped a hand over her face and dragged it downwards, while Jiraiya laughed loudly. Gaara just quirked an eyebrow and grinned. That's nothing. You should see Temari and Kankuro fight over dessert. She tried to stab him one time with a fork when he went for the last piece of Naruto's cake. She's very protective of him, isn't she? Jealous is the better word, I believe. Gaara opened the door and stepped inside to the madness. Naruto stood at the stove and 3 clones of him stood chopping up vegetables and meat furiously. Temari sat beside him on the counter with one leg thrown over the other, chatting as he stirred the pot. Kankuro sat on one of the couches in the living room, fiddling with a puppet as Shino sat close by, observing the puppeteer curiously. Hinata sat close to Kiba, patting Akamaru on the head while the dog-like young man arm-wrestled Lee, who was spouting that he wouldn't lose because he was the more youthful of the two. Shikamaru was holding back an irate Ino, who was trying to throttle an extremely happy Chuji as he cradled a pot of stew like it was a newborn baby. You could almost hear him growl when someone got too close to that pot. Miji and Tenten sat on a couch by themselves off to the side, still nursing their bumps and bruises from the earlier spar-turned all-out brawl. Sanzoku was sprawled out on the cushion beside her. Tsunade saw their state and went over to heal them and glean any information she could off of them. Jiraiya saw Sakura and Kakashi off in a corner, Kakashi's nose in a book and Sakura throwing Naruto and Temari glances when she thought no one was looking. Iruka sat at the table with a pondering look on his face. Jiraiya crossed the room and stood beside Kakashi, who cut his eyes to the older man and went back to reading. Gaara walked calmly through the throng and sat down beside Lee, who looked at him quizzically and flexed his free arm. Ah, Gaara-san. Come to see my youthfulness as I defeat Kiba? Hardly. You're just one of the few I can stand here. Lee blinked a few times and slammed Kiba's hand down on the table without looking. Kiba growled and jumped to his feet. That isn't fair, man. He beat me without even paying attention. He was largely ignored, except by Akamaru, who barked at him. I am not a sore loser. Another bark. Yeah, well, who asked you? Tsunade knelt before Tenten and began to heal her sore bones and bruised and cut legs and arms. The girl sighed in relief and leaned heavily against Miji, who groaned at the contact. Tsunade looked up at the two and grinned. So got into a fight with Naruto, huh? The two nodded. How'd he do? He made me fight his summon while he went one-on-one against Miji. What about Lee? Lee fell over before we even got started. Idiot shouldn't have used the gates in that race. So who won? Naruto. How? Miji winced when Tenten bumped one of his bruises, but answered the Hokage. He used elemental manipulation to form a tornado around his body and ground it against my Katen. The opposing forces blew me away and into the creek. He shrugged it off and laughed at me. Tsunade nodded and turned to Tenten, whose injuries were now healed. And you? I lost to his summon. That damned rat kept pounding away at me. I'm not a rat, I'm a red panda. Tenten glared down at the red ball of fur beside her and huffed. Furball. Why is it that all the human girls I meet don't like me? Aren't you bitches supposed to like cute, cuddly things? Tenten's eyes gleamed as she fished a kunai from her pouch. I suggest you start running. Sanzoku squeaked loudly and bolted for Naruto's bedroom, slamming the door behind him with his tail. Tenten beat on the door, cursing the whole time. Miji sighed and let the Hokage deal with his injuries. He beat you again, huh? Yes. At least this time there was no audience to see me get humiliated. Tsunade nodded and finished up just when Naruto called that lunch was ready. She wondered how it would taste. Jiraiya sidled up alongside Kakashi and stared out over the group as he spoke softly. Are you still upset with my apprentice? I expect an answer with words, Kakashi. Jiraiya grit his teeth and reached out with his one arm and snatched Kakashi's book away. The masked ninja narrowed his eyes and held his hand out. Give me back my book, please. Not until I get a satisfactory answer from you. Kakashi sighed and leaned back against the wall. Yes, I still resent him for leaving. Why? Because all my life people have left me and I expected Naruto to stay. He was a ninja of the leaf and he willingly left for a desolate wasteland like Suna. It's not so desolate anymore. Naruto has seen to that. And without him, they wouldn't have this. Now, my book please. Jiraiya scowled and handed the book back. He pushed himself off the wall when Naruto said it was time for lunch. Looking back over his shoulder, he leveled disappointed eyes at the copy ninja and his final remaining student. I'm disappointed in both of you. Naruto beamed as everyone settled in with a bowl of stew, Chuji with his half-eaten pot, and waited for their reaction. Temari saw the anxiety in his eyes and giggled. You'd have thought it was a life-or-death situation. Everyone took a taste test at the same time and immediately began to destroy the contents of their bowl. Kakashi was the first to finish as usual and had to admit that it was delicious. Jiraiya's earlier words echoed in his mind. He put on his eye smile and turned to his former student. The least he could do was be polite. That was very good, Naruto. The blonde beamed at the praise and thanked each of his former comrades in turn as they expressed their thoughts on it. He was just about to begin washing the dishes when the girls grabbed him. Hinata smiled and pushed him toward the table. We'll do that. You sit. Shikamaru wants a game with you. Naruto looked across the table to where Shikamaru sat before a shogi board, looking hungrily at his opponent. He smiled and sat down in front of Inara. Well, let's get this over with then. Chuji already got his wish and Ino never came up with anything other than a date, so let's play. Everyone gathered round as the two began their game, never noticing the three clones sneaking upstairs. One clone whispered to the others once they were safely in Naruto's bedroom. Okay, the boss said to read some books on shugi and a spell when we'd read a good bit on strategy. The other two nodded and sat down with their respective books. Shikamaru was sweating bullets. He hadn't had a challenge like this since Asuma, and he was enjoying himself, despite racking his brain constantly. Whenever he'd think up a strategy for how Naruto was playing at the moment, the blonde would change his game up. It was maddening. Naruto smirked as he went through the paces. Shikamaru was in a corner and in just 3 turns, he'd have him. 1 turn. 2 turns. 3. Checkmate. Shikamaru sighed and looked at Naruto with a newfound respect. That was troublesome, but it was fun. Let's do it again someday. Naruto nodded and looked at the clock. It was nearly 10 at night. They'd been playing for over 9 hours. He glanced over to where Niji and Tenten were leaned against each other snoring lightly, exhausted from the day's activities. Guess it's time to sleep. You guys can go back to your hotel and take the lovebirds with you. I'll meet Team 8 at the property tomorrow at dawn. Don't be too late. The Konoha ninjas stood and said their goodbyes while Lee picked up Niji and Sakura hefted Tenten. Team 8 promised to be at the property right after dawn and bid Naruto goodnight. The blonde left some clones to clean up the kitchen and went to shower after saying goodnight to Gaara and Kankuro. Naruto crawled into bed and laid there for a while staring at the ceiling when his door opened up and he saw a familiar silhouette walk to the end of his bed and crawl on. Sanzoku looked up over his tail and sighed. Alright, I'm going. Naruto chuckled as his summon left the room and he lifted the covers for Temari to crawl under. She snuggled up to his side and rubbed her leg up and down his, trying to warm herself up. Naruto shivered at the contact. She was clad only in panties and a t-shirt, her favorite nightwear. If your brothers find out you're sleeping with me at night like this, they'll skin me alive, you know that right? Temari just nuzzled her nose further into his neck. Ah, they'll be fine. I'm a big girl and you know where your boundaries lie. Naruto nodded and wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer to his chest. I think I'll start on my house after everyone leaves. I'll need help with the decor, you know. Temari smiled as she drifted off to sleep, the rise and fall of Naruto's chest helping lure her to dreamland. Helping design the house, huh? Sounded like plans for the future to her, so they're all in Suna, huh? Yes, all of the ones you know have gathered there for some reason. Perhaps to visit him. The dark-haired man nodded and gestured for the woman to leave and she did so reluctantly. He put his chin to his hand in a thinking pose and narrowed his eyes. Perhaps it is time I visited the one who considers me a brother. A reunion would be nice to finish that which is left undecided. The dark-haired man chuckled. Perhaps it was time to go to Suna on a whim. Chapter 14 Naruto yawned as he sat under his favorite tree, waiting for Team 8 to arrive. Gaara had informed Temari in the middle of the night that she was needed to run a quick errand to a neighboring town a day away and she had left begrudgingly. Hey, Naruto was a warm body in the cold desert night and desert nights were notoriously frigid. That was the only reason she'd been in bed with him, he missed her company already. Temari had proven to be everything he could want in a woman. Sure, she was a bit on the affectionate side. She loved to be held and touched, but Temari, like him, never received it much when she was younger. Hell, once her mother died, she never received any physical contact outside of a pat on the head from Baki. Naruto didn't mind showering her with affection since he loved it as well. But she wasn't just a fragile flower. She'd proven that many times over in their sparring sessions since he'd started living there. In battle, Temari was ruthless and would use whatever advantage she could to get the upper hand on her stronger opponent. Her analytical mind and knack for strategy could almost trump his on-the-spot plans and natural good luck. It didn't work all the time though. Naruto leaned back against the tree, nearly suffocating Sanzoku, who had taken up refuge from the cool morning air behind his back. The red panda finally wiggled his way from behind him and curled up around his neck, a much safer venue. Naruto scratched Sanzoku behind the ears and lost himself in thought again. He had come far in his training with his father's jutsus. With Temari's help, he had torn into the wind jutsus with gusto, learning them quickly with the help of his Kage Bunshins. The tornado was the culmination of several months of study and trial and error. When he'd finally been able to do it without blowing himself up, he had wrapped her up in a hug and gave her a very passionate kiss. Temari had looked at him like he was crazy, her fingers on her lips, for several moments. Naruto was afraid he'd overstepped his boundaries until she had bowled him over returning the kiss. He'd been surprised that she had been jealous of his dating around. Temari had given no indication of jealousy on the outside, but now that he thought about it, the signs had been there. Whenever they'd sparred in the past and she'd asked how his date had went, he remembered she was more aggressive the better his date had gone. She'd nearly killed him when he told her one time that he'd given a girl a goodnight kiss. He sighed and crossed his arms as he looked up at the star-pocked sky. It had certainly been an adventure living in Suna. He'd just come here because he knew a few of the people and had ended up becoming a very popular schoolteacher and very desirable to the women of the village. Too bad for them, he only wanted a certain spiky ponytailed blonde. Sanzoku snorted, letting him know that teammate was close. Naruto stood and cracked his back, before walking to the stream and washing his face to wake himself up further. He smiled when he heard Akamaru approaching at high speed and stood to say hello, only to be tackled by the enormous canine, right into the creek. Akamaru! Get off of him! What in the hell are you thinking? A few woofs was Kiba's answer as he hauled the dog off of Naruto, who was helped back to his feet by Hinata and Shino. No, I don't think he appreciated a bath this early in the morning. A few more barks made Kiba raise an eyebrow and the others look on in confusion. What do you mean he smells like temari all over? Naruto saw the need to stop any further speculation about what might have gone on last night, not that anything did happen. So what do you guys want to do? Wanna spar? Kiba threw his hands up in front of his chest in surrender. Spar? Hell no. Not after what you did to Niji and Tenten. I'd rather you show us around and maybe show us a few jutsus. Hinata nodded from where she had sat down with Sanzoku in her lap, the red panda enjoying her gentle caress on his back. Akamaru growled at the smaller creature until Sanzoku cut his eyes to the dog and growled back. Don't think I won't squish you, mutt. I've finally found a girl who doesn't want to kill me, so go away. Akamaru yipped and growled in response. I don't care if it's your spot. She'll be leaving soon and then you can have her back. Learn to share. Another growl. Sanzoku let one eye open and bared his teeth. I'm comfortable, mutt. Don't insult me just because you think you can take me. I'll show you why the raccoon tribe is feared. Akamaru, leave him alone. Hinata pets you all the time. The dog snorted and flopped down next to Hinata, throwing Sanzoku baleful glares whenever the red panda purred in contentment when Hinata scratched a good spot. Shino took the moment to catch Naruto's attention. I'll assume from your match against Niji and Tenten that you've grown much stronger, so there's no need for us to fight against you. I'd rather learn a few things anyway and leave a few bugs here to see how they'll take to the environment if you'd let me. Naruto smiled and waved his hand in an encompassing motion toward the small forest behind them. I kind of figured that you guys would want to just explore and relax today. After all, you three are most comfortable in the forest, aren't you? Kiba and Akamaru bounded off into the forest, their laughs and barks echoing all over the place as they flipped and twisted through the greenery. Shino wandered in, shaking his head at their tomfoolery and began to search for the various insects that might inhabit the place. Naruto watched them go and noticed that someone was missing. He turned around to find Hinata still petting Sanzoku. Aren't you going to go and have a bit of fun? She shook her head and smiled up at him. No. The boys are the ones that enjoy tearing through the forest. I'd much rather you sit down and talk with me. I have a few questions, and I'm sure you do too. Naruto flopped himself down in front of Hinata and crossed his legs, never breaking eye contact with her. He found being alone with her kind of awkward, now that he was with Temari. Her small, serene smile wasn't doing him any favors either. So, Hinata, how has life been treating you? She rubbed the fur on Sanzoku's back for a little bit before answering. I've been doing well. Outside of missions, I've been helping Kurenai-sensei with her son. He's quite the handful. Other than that, Father has been showing me how I will assume his duties once he is ready to hand over his status as clan head. So you've finally convinced your father that you're the right choice? Hinata shook her head and looked back toward the ground. Not completely. The only reason I'm still a viable candidate is that I have a cooler head in tight situations than Hanabi does. She tends to rush in, thinking her Hyuga blood will carry weight with everyone. Naruto smirked and leaned back on his hands. Not exactly a smart way to go. In physical battles it always worked for me, but politically that's not very smart. Hinata smiled and her eyes drooped slightly. You've grown a lot, Naruto-kun. I only wish I could have helped you. He gave her a soulful look and sat back up. Hinata, you helped me more than you think you did. Remember way back to the first Chunin exams we took? You were the only one who thought I could beat Niji. Hell, not even my teacher thought I could do it. You helped a lot, Hinata. She shook her head hard from side to side and stared at him again with her violet eyes. But Naruto, I could have done more when you were younger. I could have been your friend sooner. Instead, I hid in the shadows like a coward. I was afraid you would reject me. Naruto sighed and turned his gaze away from her. Hinata, we were both fools. I was stupid too. I only looked at Sakura back then. I never even saw you until it was too late. Tell me, Hinata, what did you think of me back then? I thought you were strong and had much potential. You were funny and strong, and I even thought you were wise. Not smart in the book sense, but wise, in that you could understand others. You were bold and brash, raised your voice to the heavens, and told others your dreams. I wished I could do that. I wanted that. And you could have had it, Hinata. If you'd just been bold enough to grab it. The two sitting down looked up to see Shino standing to the side. They'd never heard him approach. He sat down, creating a triangle between the three, and turned to Hinata. The truth, Hinata, is that none of us ever tried to befriend Naruto. All of us are at fault. But, in the same sense, Naruto never gave you the time of day either. He was rather dense, and still is in a sense. Maturity just makes him more observant over time. Like before he left the village, I believe he finally saw how beautiful you've become. Hinata blushed at the praise, and Naruto scowled as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. For your information, Shino, I saw how beautiful she was when I came back from my trip. It's kind of hard to miss. Hinata's face just got redder as the praise was heaped on. Hell yeah, she's beautiful. Who could resist that body or that cute personality of hers? Kiba had finally decided to join the conversation and flopped down opposite Shino, panting for breath. Hinata was now trying to recede into her coat, her face impossibly red. Naruto saw this and furrowed his eyebrows. There was no need for her shyness among friends. He stood and crossed to sit beside her. Once he was sitting, he threw an arm over her shoulder. Hinata gasped and looked out of her coat to see who was touching her. Now Hinata, I know you're not going to faint on us. We can't hold a conversation with you if you faint. She nodded her head dumbly and cut her eyes to where his arm rested. Now Hinata, I want you to tell us why you turn red when someone compliments you. You know what they say is true, don't you? She shook her head quickly, her hair flinging from side to side, whipping Naruto in the face. He chuckled and looked to Kiba, who had a big grin, and Shino, who looked like he was about to bust a gut, for an aburame at least. This had been a long time coming, and Hinata needed this as much as Naruto did. Why don't you believe the things you say? Because what? Hinata, you are beautiful, you are strong, and you are fit to lead your clan. Let me tell you something. That pedestal you put me on all those years ago? I'm still not fit to be on it. She turned her eyes to him and was about to deny what he said, but he held his hand up, stopping her. Hinata, I'm not perfect. I'm not your ideal guy. You saw me as you wanted to see me, just as I saw you as I wanted to see you. We're older now, and we need to let go of our illusions. Hinata, you're beautiful, but you still lack confidence, and so do I. That's not true. You have plenty of confidence. Kiba, Shino, could you leave please? And don't leave any of your bugs. Shino nodded and dragged a complaining Kiba off by the collar of his shirt. Naruto turned Hinata to face him and looked into her eyes. Listen to me. I'm not perfect. I'm a coward, Hinata. I took the path of least resistance when I left the village. I always talked about being Hokage, but I gave up that dream, and to me, that makes me a coward. That's why I embraced my teaching role. I don't want those kids to make the same mistakes I did. She blinked several times and started to speak. But Naruto, he grit his teeth and put his finger to her lips. She had to let him go on. No, Hinata. Let me finish. It took me a year to realize that Temari was what I wanted. It's taken me a year to get as far as I have with the green. It took a year for the raccoons to decide that they wanted me as a summoner. I work hard, Hinata, but I'm no genius. I'm not special like you think I am. But it's not the present I'm ashamed of, Hinata. It's the past. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes slowly, opening them again to reveal his deep blues. I tried again and again to bring back a person who didn't want to be saved, all for my own selfishness and to keep a promise to Sakura that I should have never made. I ignored you. I didn't keep my promise to Niji. I left the village. I'm ashamed of myself, Hinata. I haven't even spoken to Temari about this, but I feel I can with you. You'd understand because you're ashamed of yourself as well. He hung his head, waiting for her to retort, slap him, anything. He just wanted a response. Hinata sat for several minutes before she finally thought of what to say. You're right, Naruto. I am ashamed of myself. I've let myself be walked on for too long and it's become more habit than anything. The only time I've ever mustered any courage was when you were watching. It was borrowed courage. I was only able to raise my voice in your presence as well. I've been timid in the face of adversity. I've run from challenges. You're right, Naruto, I'm ashamed as well. Naruto gave her a quick squeeze and stood up, offering her his hand. We've both fucked up in the past, Hinata. The best we can do now is acknowledge where we messed up and go forward. We can be ashamed together and absolve each other of our shame as friends. Hinata gave him a small smile and took his hand, as Sanzoku moved to her shoulder so he could occupy his favorite kunoichi ever. She embraced Naruto and stood back. Thanks for the talk, sensei. I can see why those kids like you so much now. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and turned to where Kiba and Shino had been standing, watching them. He waved them over and turned back to Hinata. I'm sorry I wasn't what you wanted, Hinata, but there is so much more in front of you. You're beautiful and kind-hearted enough to have any guy you want, and you're strong enough to not have to take any crap off of them. She grinned and decided to have a little fun with him. Why is it then, sensei, that Temari-san can have her way with you? Naruto grinned and rubbed the back of his head. Well, she's my girlfriend. And besides, Temari was always the bossy one. She doesn't get her way nearly as often as you think she does anyway. More often than not, I put my foot down and tell her what we're going to do. Secretly, she loves that. I just let her have her way in public. She gave him a strange look and put her hands behind her back. You two are weird, you know that? Now that's not nice, Hinata. Shino and I are just different. Naruto laughed as Kiba gave her a disgruntled look and turned to Shino. What do you say to lunch, guys? My treat? Their response was a resounding yes. The rest of his visit with Team 8 was typical guy talk. What you been up to, seen any girls, how's it hanging, learned any new jutsus? Just typical guy talk. Well, as typical as it could get between Kiba's bragging and Shino's monosyllabic answers. Naruto left Team 8 that evening with a sense of nostalgia. He was always a bit closer to them than he was to the others. With Kiba, it was a series of braggadocio, a rambling of questions that was like it was read off a cue card, but it was like a ritual of theirs. How's it hanging, man? Slightly to the left and bumps the ground when I walk. Seen any new chicks? Oh man, hell yes. There was this one the other day, swear to God man, her tits were falling out of her top. Still haven't convinced Hinata to hook up with you, have you? One day, you smug motherfucker, one day asshole, learn any new jutsus? A couple. Mostly just been refining my family's jutsushi up, always the same with Kiba. Not that Shino was any better. So how you been? Fine. Seeing anybody? Currently, no. Okay, learned any new jutsus? Not in the past few weeks. Found any new bugs? Why, yes, I have. Let me tell you about them. Naruto had let his friend ramble on for what seemed like hours, while Hinata and Kiba chatted to themselves. He let Team 8 return to their hotel late in the evening, happy that he'd gotten to talk to them. He'd gotten a few requests from Hinata for flowers to press and had made them on the spot. The girl had squealed with delight and latched onto his neck. All in all, it was a successful reunion with Team 8. All that was left was Irika, Tsunade, and Jiraiya, and Kakashi and Sakura. The last two he was dreading most of all. He opened the door to the compound and walked through the living room, where a few of Kankuro's puppets were strewn about, to the kitchen. He was surprised the light was on and found Irika making tea on the stove. Finally back, huh? It's about time, Naruto. Irika-sensei? What are you doing here so late? I wanted to talk to you tonight instead of tomorrow. Tsunade and Jiraiya want you then, and I didn't want to wait. Naruto sat down at the table and accepted the cup of tea Irika handed him. Okay, sensei. I'm all ears. Irika sighed as he sat down opposite his favorite student. He couldn't believe how the boy had grown. Now, he had his own class and students that looked up to him. It was funny how things came full circle in the most unexpected ways. I met your students, you know. They're a great bunch of kids, Naruto. You've done well. They're so young and yet, I bet they could take on a graduating class from Konoha. Naruto took a sip of tea and smiled at his old sensei. He never thought he'd be talking to the man as an equal, as a schoolteacher. Life was funny that way. Thanks, sensei. That means a lot. I don't know how you put up with it all these years. I was ready to kill them after the first day. Irika laughed and slapped the table, nearly upsetting their teacups. That's rich. I can remember wanting to kill you on a daily basis. You were such a brat. Was I really that bad, sensei? Irika smirked and leaned back in his chair, throwing one leg over the other, and sipped his tea. No, you were worse. You were a holy terror, Naruto. I can't imagine a more terrible student or a better one. They both laughed for a while before sighing simultaneously and losing themselves in their tea. A long, uncomfortable silence ensued, neither knowing what to say. As usual, Irika broke the silence. Naruto, let me see your Hitayate. The blonde looked at him quizzically, but untied the headband from his arm and handed the band over. Irika took his leaf headband off and put the sandband on. So how's it look? Naruto shook his head and chuckled. It doesn't suit you, sensei. You're a leaf shinobi, through and through. Irika nodded and took the band off, handing it back to Naruto as he retied his own on his forehead. To me, the Suna Hitayate doesn't suit you either, Naruto. I wish you hadn't left the leaf. Things were going to get better with the realization of who you were. Naruto narrowed his eyes, becoming somewhat angry with those words. And if I wasn't the son of a hero, Irika-sensei, then would they have ever accepted me? No, they wouldn't have. Just because of who my father was, they would have kissed my ass and sucked up to me. I'd rather move here and be just another chunin than live in Konoha and be resentfully respected. I'd rather be here. Irika nodded and sighed. This wasn't what he came here for. Forgive me, Naruto. We all know why you left. I shouldn't have brought it up. I want to know how you've been in your time away. Naruto leaned back in his chair and put his hands behind his head. I've been all right. The kids are well-mannered and mind me most of the time. I don't know any of their names. You don't know any of their names? Not a one. That's one reason I think they do so well. They think if I see how well they're doing, I'll want to learn their name. But I'm only here to show them the way of the ninja, not become bosom buddies with them. Irika nodded and put his chin in his hand. I see. That's not the way I've taught at all. It makes sense in a nonsensical way, I suppose. Now about this girlfriend of yours, Naruto spit out the tea he had been drinking and wiped his mouth on his sleeve. Irika-sensei. What the hell kind of question is that? The kind I want to know. I've watched you grow, Naruto, and I want to know what's going on in your life. Now, tell me about Temari. Naruto smiled and leaned forward, his arms resting on the table. What's not to like about her? She's smart, funny, loving, caring, but she also has a serious side and won't hesitate to put me in my place. Even when we have a fight, it's not so bad that we try to intentionally hurt each other's feelings. She's everything I could have wanted. Irika noticed the far-off look in the blonde's eyes and smirked. Time to spring the trap. Really? So how's the sex? The sex? Oh, it's Naruto's brain finally caught up to what was being asked and his face turned red as he took in Irika's smug face. The older man had been waiting for this for a long time. Irika, I know sex Temari kill Naruto, you're stuttering. Try to talk in complete sentences please. Naruto took several deep breaths and leveled a glare at the older man that made him flinch. For your information sensei, Temari and I haven't taken that step yet, and we won't take it until she and I are both ready. Irika put up his hands in surrender. Okay, just teasing you Naruto. No reason to be all defensive. I was just joking. That wasn't funny sensei. I'm sorry, okay? It was a joke. I'll drop it. Now, what about getting your own place? Or do you plan to live here for the rest of your life? Naruto beamed and stood up from the table. Actually, I've been studying a bit of carpentry and mason work in my spare time, as well as electrical and plumbing. Bunshin are such a wonderful thing. I wanted to try my hand at building my own house. Let me show you the plans. The two spent the rest of the evening going over his plans for the future, plans that included a certain four-ponytailed blonde. Naruto awoke the next morning to someone tapping on his forehead and swiped at the hand. Gue Temari. Am sleepy. Humph. I happen to think I'm a bit more important than your little girlfriend at the moment. You'd better get up, brat. Naruto rolled over and continued snoring. Tsunade frowned and put her hands on her hips. Good-for-nothing brat. I come here to meet him instead of going to his property, and he won't even get up. Jiraiya grinned and pushed her aside with his good arm. Let a pro handle this, Tsunade. I know how to get the boy up. He grinned and whipped the covers back, before summoning a bulldog-sized toad and pointing to Naruto's head. Sit. The toad grinned and hopped onto the bed, right on top of Naruto's head. The boy struggled for a bit before tossing the toad aside, where it dispelled itself, and gasped for air. Alright, goddammit. I'm up. Stupid Iro-senin. Haha, brings back good memories, don't it, boy? Naruto blinked and looked around. This wasn't the wilderness. There was no campfire and Jiraiya only had one arm. He wasn't on his training trip. He grinned and launched himself out of the bed. Sure, does you pervert? Sure does. Naruto wrapped the giant of a man in a hug and did the same to Tsunade before striding to his closet. Now then, what do you two want to talk about? Temari sighed as she handed over the document she was supposed to deliver. This was a waste of a mission, totally wasted on her talents. Gaara could have sent anyone to do this, but no, he wants to keep her and Naruto separated, as if they were going to do anything. She huffed as she left out of the merchant's office and went to find a dango stand before she headed back home. She already missed Naruto's cooking. Strange, how years before the boy had bugged her just by opening his mouth, and now she couldn't imagine life without him around. Things were funny like that. She opened the flap to the dango shop and froze. Sitting at the bar were several very familiar cloaked figures. At least, the cloaks were familiar. Without a second thought, Temari backed out of the shop and bolted down the street. She had to make it back to Suna. Pronto. A large man walked up to where a smaller man was sitting by a fire and flopped down unceremoniously. So how long until we arrive? The smaller man cut his black eyes over and blinked slowly. What's the matter? Hard to keep the urge down? It's getting harder the closer we get to civilization. I hope I can last until we meet this Naruto. The smaller man grabbed the other by the throat, making fear appear in his eyes. He's mine. Don't forget your place. He thrust the larger man backwards and returned to staring at the fire while the others looked on. Soon, brother, soon. I'll have my eyes and you'll have nothing. No animals made a sound as that sinister chuckle emanated throughout the forest. Chapter 15. Naruto ushered the two older folks out of his room so that he could get dressed and yawned once they'd left. Getting sat on by that toad was a definite blast to the past, and although it had been annoying, it did bring back memories of his road trip with Jiraiya. He shrugged his clothing on and left his bedroom, Sanzoku draped around his neck. You know, you have got to be the laziest summon I've ever met. You didn't even warn me that those two were in my bedroom. The one you call Bachan threatened to neuter me if I told you, so bite me. Besides, watching you get sat on was entertaining. I'll remember that. You do that. Lay out something for me to eat when you're in the kitchen, okay? Lazy ass. Sanzoku snorted and went back to sleep. Naruto rolled his eyes and continued on down the stairs. If it weren't for the fact that the red panda was a fearsome warrior, as Tenten could attest to, and was useful in a pinch, he'd have sent his ass back to the summon's realm so fast he rounded the corner of the hallway and stretched again once he was in the kitchen. Tsunade and Jiraiya sat at the table, sipping coffee and chatting with each other. Tsunade smiled when she saw her favorite blonde come in. Good morning, Naruto. Hope you don't mind us making some coffee. Nah, I don't mind. It's Tamari's coffee anyway. I don't usually drink the stuff. I prefer tea. Want something to eat? Jiraiya swallowed the last of his cup and poured some more. What do you have? Naruto flipped through the cupboards and fridge. Well, we got fruit, bread, bacon, eggs, you know, breakfast stuff. Bacon and eggs sounds delicious. And heat up that bread with some honey. Tsunade stood up and walked around the counter before spinning Naruto around and holding him by the shoulders. Before you start cooking though, she wrapped him in an enormous hug, nearly crushing his spine. It's so good to see you again, brat. I've missed you. Naruto smiled and hugged her back, squeezing slightly to show her that his strength had improved as well. I've missed you too, Bachan. It hasn't been the same without you. Jiraiya coughed into his hand and the two blondes looked over at him. What about me? I don't get a hug or at least a handshake? Naruto narrowed his eyes and released Tsunade. You tried to crush my head with one of your toads this morning. You're lucky I don't castrate you. Be glad I'm making you breakfast. Ungrateful brat. Naruto smiled and pulled out a pan from under the counter to fry the bacon and eggs. There's the Arasenin I remember. Now, what did you two want to talk about? Tsunade reached out to where Sanzoku was chomping away happily on some fruit and tried to pet him when he growled at her. Don't touch me. You threatened to take away my nuts earlier. Tsunade frowned and turned back to Naruto. Well, we want to hear what you've been up to and to discuss some things about Konoha with you. But that's business. Let's hear about your life up till now. Naruto nodded as he cracked the eggs on the side of the pan and listened to them sizzle in the heat. Well, when I first arrived here, Tsunade and Jiraiya smiled as they listened to Naruto's story. It made them both happy he had found some form of acceptance among the people of Sunagakure. That's what made the next thing they had to discuss so uncomfortable. Tsunade shifted in her seat and held out her cup for more tea. They'd been sitting at the table for a couple of hours now, and she was beginning to feel a little numb in her buttocks. Can we move this to somewhere a bit more comfortable? My butt is falling asleep. Naruto and Jiraiya laughed at her and Tsunade growled. It wasn't her fault the wooden chairs were so unforgiving. The three stood and Naruto led the way to the living room, clearing some of Kankuro's puppets out of the way. Once they were settled in, Naruto looked from one to the other. So what's this all about? Tsunade took a deep breath and looked at Jiraiya, who motioned for her to go ahead. He was only here to offer support. This was village business and not his ground to cover. She closed her eyes and slowly opened them, locking his bright blue eyes with her chocolate brown. We've already talked to Gaara about what we'll discuss here and he said no. I agree with him reluctantly, but unfortunately, the issue just will not go away because we said so. Naruto frowned and leaned back in his chair as Sanzoku patted in and leapt up beside him on the couch, curling up. Why does it feel like I'm only getting half a story here? What are you talking about? The Konoha Council wants you back, Naruto. They don't want the last Namikaze, the son of the Yondaime, living in another village, allied or not. They want you to return with us. Naruto set his face in a grimace. The answer is no, of course. I'm not going back to a village that never wanted me until I could be used for political purposes. It's not happening. Tsunade nodded and took a sip of tea. It wasn't as calming as sake, but Naruto made some damn good tea. That's what I told them, but they keep pressing the issue. I'm going to need you to come back to Konoha to settle this yourself. And what guarantee do I have that I won't be imprisoned and kept against my will? Jiraiya leaned forward and rested his one arm on his legs. Because that would be tantamount to declaring war with Suna. They'd be holding a very important friend of the Kazekage hostage and a very important person to us hostage. The political fallout would not be pretty. Naruto nodded and Tsunade decided to continue. You won't be held against your will. We just need you to come with us and talk to the council, tell them that you don't wish to return to Konoha and that you are happy here. The blonde schoolteacher folded his arms and sighed. I thought I made that all clear over a year ago when I burned my father's and mother's scrolls. I thought it was clear when I requested transfer to Suna. I thought I made it clear when I told them all this, to their faces. The two older ninjas nodded. You did, Naruto, but they aren't politicians for nothing. Everyone in Konoha knows who you are now, and everyone wants you back. They want Uzumaki Naruto to come back home and take up the name of Namikaze. Naruto's frown deepened significantly. No, they want the son of Namikaze Minato to come back so they can suck up to him. Uzumaki Naruto isn't on their radar. They aren't sorry for treating me like shit. They just want to kiss my ass for political favors. Jiraiya straightened up a bit, his sensei side coming back out. Look here, Naruto. You may be a Suna shinobi now, but Tsunade is only asking you to come and settle this once and for all. You owe her at least that much. Naruto's eyes narrowed even more, his obstinate side coming back out. And why exactly do I owe her? Jiraiya's face twisted up in outrage. Because she's the one who's been keeping the council off your back for the past year, you little shit. Jiraiya, calm down. Naruto, I'm hurt that you're acting like this. I hope you set a better example than this for your students. Don't bring my students into this. As for my attitude, how do you expect me to react? Oh sure. I'll happily go back to Konoha with you and receive the stares of awe, forced respect, disgust, and hatred. I don't think so. Tsunade straightened her backbone and glared at him. They'd been having such a wonderful time earlier and now, here was the Council of Konoha coming between them once again. We've already cleared this with Gaara, Naruto. You're coming with us to settle this, and that's final. He looked aghast that they would do something like this without his knowledge. Even Gaara was doing things behind his back. Naruto quickly schooled his face back into an indifferent look, something that looked out of place on him. Fine, since everyone seems to think this will be in my best interests, despite my say-so, I'll go as soon as Temari gets back. I want to get this over with so I never have to step foot in Konoha again. He rose to stand and was about to leave when his arm was caught by Tsunade. He turned to say something but stopped when he saw the tears welling up in her eyes. Please Naruto, don't act like this. We don't want this any more than you do, but it's necessary. Don't be angry with us, just because we're doing our jobs. He swung his head from one to the other, looking for any sign of deception and found none. They were just doing what they had to. Naruto sighed and let his body relax, but Tsunade didn't let go of his arm. Naruto, we care about you. We don't want you unhappy. That's why I let you leave. I wanted you to stay, but your happiness means a lot to me since you haven't had much of it. Jiraiya didn't want you to go. He lost someone else important to him that day. You haven't visited either. Naruto hung his head slightly and turned away. Gaara's kept me busy. Jiraiya snorted and clapped him on the shoulder. You're full of shit. You were afraid to come back home because you thought you would stay there. You can't lie to me, brat. Naruto gave them a small, sad smile. Yeah, I was afraid to go back. I didn't want to go back to Konoha and think it was home. I have a new life here and I don't want to ruin that. Tsunade and Jiraiya nodded and Naruto walked toward the door, opened it, and turned to them. I'm going to go do the most difficult thing of this whole visit. I'm going to talk to Kakashi and Sakura and try to resolve the whole thing with them. This might take a while, so can you tell me where they are? Tsunade winced when he mentioned Sakura and Kakashi. Those two were especially resentful of Naruto's decision and hadn't wanted to come. Tsunade had strong-armed the two because she knew it needed to come to a conclusion, one way or the other. Do what you have to do, Naruto. They're at the hotel and haven't left except to eat. I just hope you know what you're doing. Naruto smiled at the two as he got walked out the door. Me too. Kakashi and Sakura had been in their hotel room since they'd last seen Naruto, not really wanting to go out. When they weren't chatting together, Kakashi was reading his book and Sakura was keeping herself occupied by reading a book as well or by flipping through the channels on the TV. Both were bored out of their minds. Sakura heard a knock at the door and moved to answer. She looked over to Kakashi, who shrugged since they weren't expecting any visitors. Maybe they're all ready to go home and have come to tell us we're leaving tomorrow. Kakashi shrugged and went back to reading his book as he heard the door creak open and dropped it just as suddenly when he heard Sakura's icy voice. Naruto. Kakashi was immediately on his feet and quickly crossed the room to the door. The person standing before him was an immediate reminder of the sensei he'd lost and the student he had lost as well. Naruto looked just like his father, right down to the look in his eyes. It was the look Minato had every time he had to say something he didn't really want to. May I come in? Sakura stormed away from the door, but Kakashi stayed, the small smile under his mask evident. Of course, Naruto. What are you doing here? Naruto listened to the door close behind him and closed his eyes, breathing in slowly. Once the latch clicked, he knew there was no going back. I'd like the two of you to accompany me to my property so we can talk and work out any frustrations that we might have. Afterward, if we're all still talking to one another, I'd like you to come back to the compound and I'll make lunch. Naruto had a strained smile on his face as he spoke. He noticed Kakashi's introspective look and Sakura's look of disdain. He half wished they'd accept and half wished they would decline. Kakashi's voice broke the silence. We'll go with you, Naruto. We'll be there shortly. Naruto nodded and walked out the door, closing it behind him and ran for the property. His heart was pounding more than when he'd spoken to Temari the first time on their first real date, and he settled under his favorite shade tree to meditate until they arrived. He would need his nerves to be calm since he knew that Sakura had a volatile temper, much like his girlfriend. Sakura turned to Kakashi once she was sure that Naruto was gone, her face twisted in anger. What the hell, Kakashi? I don't want to talk to him. Kakashi turned slowly, his one visible eye showing his trademark boredom. Sakura, we've both been stewing over this for over a year now. It's time to try to mend the fences, or at least talk and leave on amicable terms. Jiraiya talked to me the other day and said we need to leave the past behind. I'm willing to do that. It isn't healthy to hold a grudge like this. Now get ready to go. She snorted loudly and stomped around the room, grabbing her kunai pouch and pulling her shoes on, growling the whole time. Kakashi sighed and pulled his sandals on, before slipping his book into his gear pouch and opened the door, ushering her out. He could only hope this would go well for all three of them. Naruto had slowed his breathing to acceptable levels. His meditation had calmed him much, and it was a good thing since what was to come would probably be very, very stressful. He had sent Senzoku off to do something else, away from what might be a very emotional and very physical battleground. If Sakura used to pound him into the dirt for annoying her, he didn't want to think about what she might attempt for truly upsetting her. Not that he would let her hit him. That was Temari's sole privilege. With his eyes closed, his other senses were incredibly acute and he heard the sound of the ground crunching under sandals before they were even in sight. His eyes opened slowly and he smiled slightly at the sight of Kakashi and Sakura approaching. Kakashi gave him his traditional lazy wave while Sakura just stared at him, barely containing her ire. Naruto stood and brushed his pants off. Look, I know neither of you are happy with my decision, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to get all your frustrations out in any way you deem appropriate. Sakura, we can start with you. Her response was to slap him as hard as she could on the cheek. Naruto simply stood there, his head turned to the side, his eyes never leaving her. The tears began to well up in her eyes as she glared at him. "Start with me? Start with me? How dare you? You left us, and now you act like it doesn't matter, like it never happened. You think you can just talk to us, and everything will be okay? It won't. I hate you, Naruto." He slowly turned his head back towards her, the bruise on his face already healing. "You don't mean that, Sakura. I know you don't." She snarled and thrust her fist forward, catching him in the gut. Naruto grunted and sank to his knees. He didn't like being a punching bag, but he'd let her have a few shots before he retaliated. He wasn't the Naruto she used to know, and she'd have to realize that. "I do mean it. You left me, just like Sasuke did. You left me all alone. You didn't once think about my feelings, you selfish bastard. You didn't think about how I'd feel." Naruto could feel his ire growing with every word. He'd planned to let her work out her frustrations, but that plan was quickly falling apart. Plus, he was beginning to get irritated with her increasingly painful blows. Sakura would rain down a blow on him after every sentence. "You never stopped to think about me. You never thought how it would affect Kakashi and me. You never visited, never wrote, never let us know if you were alive or dead. You never kept your promise." The sound of the dull thumps of her fist hitting him was broken by the sound of flesh smacking flesh as Naruto caught her hand, his face set into a grimace. It frightened her to see him like that. "Now let me tell you something, Sakura. I've always cared about Team 7. I've always cared about you. I've always tried to go out of my way to make others happy. Was it so wrong to want happiness for myself? Was it?" Sakura gaped at him before her anger came back and she swung at him with her free hand. "Why didn't you think of me?" Naruto ducked her punch and lashed out at her with a kick. "Why didn't you think of me?" Kakashi watched as the two traded blow after blow and knew he had to step in soon. They were being productive in this. Hell, the two of them were actually backsliding. They were supposed to come here to fix their broken relationship, not disintegrate it. He stepped between the two and caught their arms, wincing at the pressure. "Stop it. You're both acting like children. Both of you sit down now." Naruto walked over to his tree and flopped down with his arms crossed. Sakura sat down in the shade of another tree, her knuckles cracking under pressure. Kakashi sighed and looked from one to the other. "Sakura, we came here to make peace, not pound Naruto into the ground." "Naruto, I'm disappointed that you would strike Sakura." Naruto glared at the man and Kakashi shivered slightly, reminding himself that Naruto was a teacher now as well and that he had a certain presence about him. "So what? I'm supposed to let her pound me into the ground while I stand there? No, damn it. You're both supposed to talk it out like adults. We aren't enemies, we're allies. We're comrades. We used to be a team. Let's talk about this. You don't really seem like the talking type, Kakashi. You never were. Why the interest now?" Kakashi sent a little killing intent Naruto's way. "Do you want to mend the fences or not? I've done a little soul searching as of late, Naruto, and I don't want to be bitter about your leaving anymore. I don't think Sakura does either, she's just too stubborn to admit it." Sakura mumbled something unintelligible and Kakashi turned his glare to her. "And as for you, don't start fistfights here. Naruto isn't the same person you used to push around Sakura. And I don't think Temari would appreciate you beating up her man. I don't want to be here in the first place." Kakashi sighed and sat down. "That's perfectly fine, Sakura. You can sit there and watch as Naruto and I talk and try to re-establish our rapport with one another while you sit there and sulk and miss your chance." A small whisper that sounded like "fine" was heard as Sakura slowly crawled over to where the two were sitting, before sitting with her legs crossed. Naruto kept a neutral look on his face as he spoke. "I just want you two to know I didn't want to leave. I just saw no other alternative to anything at the time. I was tired of hatred from my own village. When I found out who my parents were, I thought for a single moment, hoped against hope, that everything would get better. But it didn't. My heritage was denied because of who I was. Sakura shook her head. But they found out who you actually were, Naruto. There was no reason to leave. Everything was going to get better. Naruto sighed and looked Sakura in her eyes, making her squirm somewhat. Sakura, I don't want my ass kissed because of who my parents were. I lived my whole life as a nobody, dirt in the eyes of everyone, including you, because I had no parents to call my own. I never knew my parents or who they were, and God rest their souls, I have no idea who they truly were. Kakashi knew my father, but I don't know anything about them except what I'd been told by Tsunade and Jiraiya. He refused to tell them about the scrolls he had copied. They may be comrades, but they were still loyal leaf ninjas. Your parents were good people, Naruto. I'm sure they'd be proud of you. Naruto turned to Kakashi and smiled sadly. Would they, Kakashi? Or would they be ashamed that I took the easy way out and left the village? Gave up on my dream and ran away? I don't know what they'd think. The point is, if I had stayed, things would have only got better on the surface. I still would have been resented and hated. Sakura tried to come up with a convincing argument, but she just couldn't. The longer she talked, the more she realized that she had missed Naruto terribly. Her misguided animosity toward him was being washed away by the fact that he had never been wanted in Konoha. Kakashi didn't know what to say to any of it. Naruto, we would have stood beside you no matter what. And I appreciate that. But you have to realize that I'm happy here. You two have to go on with your lives without me there. I can't be your sounding board, Sakura. I can't be your tie to the past, Kakashi. You have to start living for tomorrow. Move on. Think about it. What tied us together in the first place? Kakashi smiled under his mask and looked to Sakura. Teamwork wrong. The pink-haired girl and the silver-haired man whipped their heads around to Naruto. We weren't truly a team until after Sasuke left. The three of us were the true team. Sasuke was the thing that brought us together and united us. Up until he left, Sakura could have cared less if I dropped dead, and you could have cared less if I just disappeared. Both denied the charge at the same time with an emphatic, "That's not true." Naruto shook his head, but Kakashi persisted. No, listen to me, Naruto. You were always important to me as a student. I cared for your development just as much as Sasuke or Sakura. Pfft. Yeah, right. The only thing you ever did was bring me vegetables when I was younger and show me how to train using Kage Bunshin after I came back. Other than that, you didn't do much. Kakashi's frown could be felt through his mask. I was trying to make up for lost time until someone ran away. Naruto set his face in a grimace and leaned forward slightly. This whole situation had been a long time coming, and old wounds were seeing light for the first time in years now. There should never have been any lost time to make up. Well, what about me? I always cared about you. Naruto stared at the girl incredulously, glad that no one was there to see this whole fiasco. I believe you said one time that I always got in the way of you and Sasuke. You didn't ask if I was all right on the bridge during our first real mission after fighting Haku. You begged me to bring Sasuke back to you when he left the village. When I came back from my training journey, all you ever did was cry when things became too harsh. Hell, you never thanked me for saving you from Gaara. That's not true, Naruto. How can you say those things when you know they're not true? Easy. Because I do know they're true. Neither of you cared about me leaving until you realized how much easier I made your lives. Without me around to ridicule or boss around or use as fodder for jokes, your lives became less fun and meaningful. That key component to get Sasuke back was gone as well. The whole time Naruto was speaking, his voice was growing in volume, and the ferocity with which he was delivering his diatribe was making Kakashi and Sakura wince, despite their growing anger. Without the Kyuubi brat around, I bet everyone's lives have been better in Konoha. I bet the two of you didn't think I was serious at first, did you? It's just Naruto pouting. He'll be back in a couple of days. He has to bring back Sasuke after all. Well, fuck that. My life has meaning too, you know. I've lived my whole life so others could be safe and happy. All I wanted from you two was the knowledge that you were happy if I was happy, but you couldn't even give me that. You stewed over it for over a year. His teeth were now visible, the slightly longer than average fangs bared. I'm truly happy for the first time in my life, and the first thing you two do when you see me after a year is snub me. No hello, no how you doing, you turned your nose up at me like I was trash. Sakura grit her teeth, her knuckles cracking from pressure. Well, I didn't see you making any effort to speak to us. We had every right to be upset. You abandoned us. I didn't abandon shit. There was never a team dynamic with us. Kakashi spewed all that bull about teamwork, but when it came down to the wire, he was just like the rest of you, casting me aside for something better. And you were no fucking better. If Sasuke would never have left, you would have continued to be his little bitch. Her retort was to put her fist into his jaw as hard as she could, sending him careening across the ground to stop up against a tree. Before she or Kakashi could move, he was back beside them, his fist planted in her gut. The speed with which he moved was astounding. You want to get physical? Fine. Let's get physical. He lashed a kick at Kakashi's head only to have the Jounin dodge and try to backhand him. Naruto leapt back and squared off with the two. This has been a long time coming. We have issues to settle, and as ninjas, the only way to settle them is with our fists. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Over 100 clones poofed into existence, and Kakashi and Sakura paled slightly. Naruto wasn't messing around with them. He had past grievances, and he wanted a measure of payback. The clones charged them, and they began a frantic melee to disperse as many as possible. Naruto never moved from his spot, absorbing all the information that his clones gave him when they were dispelled. He retained the knowledge of Kakashi's cold stare in battle and the way Sakura grit her teeth as she destroyed one of his doppelgangers. Throughout it all, one thing became certain to him. They weren't enjoying the fight, and neither was he. It shouldn't have happened this way. Kakashi and Sakura finally rid themselves of the last clone and settled into guarded positions as they looked at the original Naruto. They immediately noticed the tears in the corner of his eyes and the crack in his voice as he spoke. You think I want to hurt people I considered family? I thought of Sasuke as my brother, even though he wanted to kill me. I tried and tried to bring him home, but he didn't want to come home. I thought of you as my sister and you as that crazy uncle you're ashamed of. Irika was like a father to me. Bachan and Erosenin may be the closest thing to grandparents I'll ever have. I don't want to fight any of you. Kakashi dropped his guard and Sakura did the same. They were soon back on guard as Naruto himself rushed forward, driven by his pain, his face set into a look of sorrow as he began to rain blow after blow upon them. Why can't you see things my way? I hurt all the time back then, but no one stepped up to help. All I wanted was a little love, someone who cared, but I couldn't have that. I got a team, but none of you wanted me. You only used me. Naruto landed a blow on Sakura's cheek and clubbed Kakashi in the head with the back of his hand. Both were amazed at his speed, but they weren't slouches either. They also had an advantage. Naruto had been teaching for the better part of a year, and while his skills weren't rusty, he was facing two extremely dangerous foes in tandem. Sakura landed a kick on his thigh while Kakashi punched him in the shoulder. The blows rocked him hard and Naruto began to stumble. On his way back, he hit Kakashi in the Hitayate, nearly giving him a black eye, and kicked Sakura in the gut. They were all fighting on empty, the emotional turmoil beginning to take its toll on them as their blows became weaker and weaker from lack of trying. Naruto began to tear up as he fought, not from physical pain but from not wanting to fight them. Kakashi wasn't looking too hot either. That's when they decided jutsus would be appropriate. Naruto was bound and determined to show that he didn't need a teacher to learn anything. He wouldn't do anything too threatening to them, but unleashed his tornado jutsu and rushed at them. They both leapt away as he impacted the ground and left wide craters. Their eyes bulged. If he had connected with that, Sakura charged her fist with chakra and punched the ground hard, splitting it, and barely missed Naruto as he ran toward Kakashi. The one-eyed ninja formed his seals and summoned a water dragon to hit Naruto in the chest. The boy disappeared with a puff and Kakashi found the back of his head assaulted by a fist before he kawaramied out of danger. Naruto pulled another jutsu out of his hat and blew them both away with a futon, de tappa. Sakura was bowled into the creek while Kakashi hit a tree, nearly breaking it in half. Sakura came back with a punch to Naruto's jaw and Kakashi hit him with a low-powered right tanjutsu. None of them were really trying to injure the others, but the fight wasn't serving its purpose. It was supposed to make them feel better. Instead, it was making them feel worse. Naruto was now wiping full-fledged tears away as he ran and Kakashi looked ashamed. Sakura had begun to tear up as well and got behind the blonde, wrapping his arms in an arm lock. Her anger at him was all but gone as the fight was leaving them physically and emotionally drained. "We didn't mean to use you. We're sorry, okay? Just let us fix it." Naruto knocked her away and lashed out at Kakashi, putting the man on defensive. "There's nothing left to fix. We can't even talk to each other anymore without fighting. That's how bad it's gotten." Kakashi knocked him onto his back with a well-timed punch and quickly wrapped his arms behind him, much in the way he had done Sasuke all those years ago. "Let us apologize, Naruto. Stop fighting us. We get it, okay? We know we were wrong. Let us try to fix it." Naruto threw Kakashi off of him and rose to his knees, but didn't move. He was exhausted from all this, more so than any fight he'd ever had. "They'd apologized, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I've said and done here today. Forgive me." Sakura knelt beside him and drew him into a hug, the feeling of his warmth automatically familiar and comforting even after a year. She cried lightly into his shoulder and squeezed a little more. "I'm sorry too for anything hurtful I might have said. Let's forgive but not forget though, okay? Everything we said today was true and needed to be let out." Naruto felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Kakashi's smiling eye. That was probably as close as he'd ever get to a hug from Kakashi. "I'm willing to start with a clean slate if you are Naruto. We know you won't come back to Konoha and we're okay with that now. We just needed some form of closure." Naruto chuckled lightly and finally got Sakura to release him. "I guess we just needed to beat the crap out of each other, huh? That was always the way we settled anything on Team 7. The other two laughed lightly and they all enjoyed the silence, their bruises reminders of what had been said and done. They might not be a team anymore, hell, they still weren't totally comfortable with each other, but wounds were beginning to heal. Naruto finally stood with a groan and reached both his hands out to the reclining Konoha ninjas. "Let me show you something I haven't shown anyone but Temari." They took his hands and followed closely behind him. Naruto turned to them as they neared the caves and spoke with authority. "You must understand that this is holy ground. Don't take anything from here and don't try to harm any of the inhabitants. Understood?" Kakashi and Sakura nodded and Naruto ushered them inside. What they saw was astounding. All around them were crystals of all different sizes and colors, throwing prisms of light onto each other in a never-ending river of colors. Kakashi and Sakura spun round and round taking in the visage. "Beautiful, isn't it? This is one of my new burdens. I am the guardian of these caves. The raccoon tribe has asked me to ensure their safety." Sakura turned to him in awe. "Is that why there are so many raccoons running around here?" "Of course. This is their holy ground. I'm just a guardian. But this is where I connect to nature. These caves are host to many spirits and they help guide me in my meditation." "You mean there are ghosts here?" "No, I mean the spirits of the earth. It is from here that I can control the green most effectively and where my wind manipulation is the strongest. But it is in poor taste to do such things here and I have found that the spirits grow angry if I try jutsus here. The only thing safe to try is the green and I think that's because I'm helping the earth." Kakashi stared at him and blinked. "So why did you bring us here?" Naruto shrugged and grinned. "I thought after our little tiff that we could all use some spiritual healing. Don't you feel it? Like your spirit is lifted, that it is lighter, that your soul feels freer? Here, I am more in touch with my spiritual side, allowing me empathy and insight into your viewpoint of our argument. And I can see your points quite clearly. Can you see mine?" Kakashi and Sakura closed their eyes and opened their minds. Now they could see Naruto's point of view, feel the stares and glares of hatred, feel his feelings toward them, what he felt for Sasuke, how he loved his new home and Temari. They could feel it all, and it was enlightening. Sakura opened her eyes and embraced him again. I'm sorry, Naruto. I'm sorry for everything. I want things to go back to how they used to be, like after you came back from your trip. I want us to be able to talk again. Yes, Naruto. I want to be a proper friend since I'm no longer your sensei. Let's put all this behind us and try to be amicable at the very least. Naruto smiled and nodded. This is what he had wanted since he had heard of how the two had treated Temari after he had moved to Suna. His stomach growled all of a sudden and he remembered his offer. Who's up for lunch? I'm starving. Sakura and Kakashi laughed and followed him out and back to the compound. Naruto called over his shoulder as they walked. I want you two to apologize to Temari as well for how you treated her. The two paled. Temari was a lot less likely to be forgiving than Naruto was. Temari practically flew over the sand on her way back. She'd been running for hours, and when she saw the walls of Suna she put on a final burst of speed, rocketing past the guards and blowing by everyone on her way to the tower. She forsook the door and climbed the side of the building, going all the way to Gaara's office. The Kazekage took one look at his distraught sister and knew something was up. Something big. Temari tried to catch her breath and talk at the same time. Ran all the way here. Akatsuki, where's Naruto? Gaara tried to calm her down and sat her down in his chair. Talk normally. Catch your breath. Temari took great gulps of breath and finally got her heartbeat back under control. I saw Akatsuki in that town you sent me to. I don't know if they're heading this way, but I need to find Naruto. Where is he? He's with Kakashi and Sakura today. Temari paled and bolted out of the room to find her boyfriend. Gaara called for Kankuro immediately. If Akatsuki was on the move again, they'd best be prepared. Temari had run for the property as fast as she could and was somewhat happy and irritated at the same time that they weren't there. Signs of their having been there were everywhere, however. Uprooted trees, skid marks, potholes. They had had quite a talk. She turned on her heel and ran for the compound. Hopefully he'd be there. As she entered the house, she heard the sound of Naruto's laughter and rushed in, nearly bowling him over with a bear hug. Whatever he'd been holding went flying, but Kakashi skillfully caught the pan and its contents and set it back on the stove. Temari looked up at the two coldly and dragged Naruto to his feet. Hatake. Haruno. The two flinched at the cold address but responded by bowing low. We apologize for the way we treated you, Temari-san. Please forgive us. Temari blinked and turned to a grinning Naruto. I guess your talks worked, huh? He nodded vigorously. She smiled but immediately shook her head. She had to tell him. Naruto, I saw some Akatsuki as I was coming back. They were in a village a day away from here. I don't know if they're headed this way or not. Everyone present froze at that and Naruto closed his eyes. Peace couldn't last forever. I had a year without them, but I guess forever was too much to ask. He turned to the Konoha nins. I think your stay may be extended a tad. Just in case you understand. Sakura and Kakashi nodded. They understood completely. Good. We'd better go find Bachan and Erosenin. They'll want to hear this too. The other three nodded and they set off to find the rest of their group. Trouble was coming to Suna in the form of two groups. They traveled from different directions, but their goals were the same. To find and eventually kill a certain Jinchuriki, the last Jinchuriki. The group's goal was to find Uzumaki Naruto and take his life. One through extraction, the other through extermination. The desert would play host to a fierce battle soon. A battle where all sides were enemies and things would come to a head. One way or another. And at the middle of it all was someone who wanted nothing to do with any of it. Chapter 16. While Temari went to discuss strategy with Gaara and the Konoha nins, Naruto walked outside the gates of the village and sat down on the sand. The gate guards gave him some funny looks and one of them walked forward apprehensively. Naruto-san, what are you doing meditating here? Naruto didn't turn around and kept his eyes closed. The Akatsuki might be headed this way. I'm going to send out some scouts to see where they are and if they are indeed coming. But Naruto-san, our forces are not necessary at the moment. I have my own. Please return to your posts and don't worry. The guards were not comfortable with that, but walked back to their posts and stared at him. The Akatsuki had already infiltrated Suna once and beaten the Kazekage, but Naruto had done that when he was younger. Maybe there was nothing to worry about. Naruto concentrated his chakra and flashed through the signs for Kuchiyose. A small army of coatis, red pandas, and raccoons popped into existence. Naruto eyed them all and smiled. Listen guys, I need you to do a little scouting. Run out into the desert and go as far as you can. Pick a direction and report back if you see anyone heading this way. Got it? Hi. Good. Now get going. The guards watched in amazement as the raccoon tribe members raced off in different directions at high speeds, their bushy tails flopping as they ran. Naruto remained seated with his legs crossed, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes closed. The brave gate guard crept forward again and tapped him on the shoulder. Naruto-san, what should we do? Remain calm. There is nothing to fear yet. The guard nodded and walked back to his post, fidgeting with a kunai nervously. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes again when he heard the sand beside him crunch and opened one eye to glance up at Temari. She sat down beside him and pulled her legs up to her chest, her ankles crossed and arms wrapped around her legs securely. Hey you. What's the plan? Temari turned her head to him and smiled. We wait for them and then launch an offensive. We just need to find out how many there are. Gaara will be sending out scouts soon. No need. I've already sent out several scouts. She gaped and grabbed his arm. Naruto, you don't have the authority. No, Temari, not Sunanins. I sent out raccoon summons. Speaking of summons, where is Sanzoku? I haven't seen him lately. He's with Hinata, curled up around her neck. Little fuzzy bastard, you two really should get along. Although it is funny to watch you two. Temari leaned against him and sighed. We only argue because it's fun. We actually get along pretty well. What do you plan to do? I'm waiting for my summons to find something. Hopefully, we'll at least know the direction they're coming from. Temari nodded and continued to lean against him. She silently wished that the peace they had could have gone on forever, but alas, it was not meant to be. She realized that if Akatsuki was successful in capturing Naruto, there would be no Chiyo to bring him back to life, not that Naruto would want anyone to sacrifice themselves for him. The thought was unsettling. Not to mention that once they were through with this, if they survived, then they had to go to Konoha and jaw jack with the bull-headed council. Gaara had told her she would be going for emotional support and that they could stay as long as they wanted, a vacation of sorts. Not a vacation she wanted, but then, any time with Naruto was great. After almost 10 minutes of silence they heard the crunching of sand under sandals, and turned to find the Konoha Nins and Gaara and Kankuro. Gaara strode forward and Naruto and Temari stood. The scouts are ready to deploy. No need. I've already sent out summons. Some should be reporting in soon. Gaara nodded and told the gathered scouts to prepare for an attack. They saluted and rushed off to inform the rest of their comrades. Gaara took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Tell me, Naruto, do you ever foresee us having peace? Will we ever be able to live normal, happy lives? Naruto gave his friend a sad smile and sat down on the ground again, facing the desert. You might, Gaara, now that your demon is gone. I never will. Your sister is all the normality I need though. Gaara snorted when Temari's face lit up and she flushed red. The rest of the entourage chuckled and she hastily sat down next to her boyfriend again, trying to maintain some dignity. Naruto snickered and leaned over, giving her a peck on the cheek, gaining in awe from the gathered ninjas and a glare from Temari. Stop that. You're ruining my reputation. I'm supposed to be Sabaku no Temari, not a mushy little girl. But Temari-chan, you'll always be tough to me. She ground her teeth and punched him in the shoulder. Despite it being a sweet thing to say, and secretly, she enjoyed the banter, he was saying it in front of everyone and it was embarrassing. Before she could unleash her half-hearted wrath upon him, a poof of smoke appeared before the two and a kawaii raced into Naruto's lap. Naruto-sama. Naruto-sama. There's two guys in cloaks with red clouds heading this way from the east. Very good. What do they look like? The little kawaii blinked and tilted its head. I dunno. All humans look alike to me. Plus they were kind of hiding their faces. Naruto groaned and picked the kawaii up, holding it to eye level. Look little fella, I need to know. Were they carrying any weapons or anything? Oh yeah. One had a big, bandaged thing on his back. The other one was really short. That's all. Naruto sighed heavily and sat the kawaii down, patting it on its head. Kisame and Itachi. It seems those two never give up. If I didn't hate them, I might be willing to admire them. You may go now. The kawaii nodded and dispelled itself with a puff of smoke. No sooner had it disappeared than a raccoon appeared, clad in a red and gold vest, with a fez on its head. Temari snickered at how the thing looked, but it ignored her. Naruto-sama. There's a group of 4 headed this way. One of them is a really big guy who shakes a lot, and another guy has a really big sword, and another is a really loud chick, and the other guy is really quiet. The quiet one is the leader, I think. Naruto gave a shuddering sigh and looked to the heavens. It seemed sometimes that perhaps Niji was right and there really was such a thing as fate. How else could you explain why his life sucked so bad most of the time? Temari picked the little raccoon up and sat him on her lap. Are you sure about what you said? The fez-hatted raccoon nodded and wrung its paws together. Yeah, I'm sure. The short guy gave off a really bad vibe. It was like he was saturated with evil. Who was he? His name is Uchiha Sasuke, and he used to be my friend. Or so I thought, once upon a time. You may go now. The little raccoon nodded and was about to dispel itself when it saw Sanzoku curled around Hinata's neck. It tilted its head and ran up to her feet. Sanzoku. I thought you were Naruto-san's familiar. Why are you with this girl? Because she's pretty and she doesn't try to kill me. I like the blonde I was speaking to better. That's because you don't know her. Sanzoku heard a growl and saw Temari glaring at him. Care to say that to my face, furball? Sanzoku shuddered on Hinata's shoulder and hopped down. Run while you can, Kit. She's bonkers. I can still hear you. The raccoon dispelled itself before it got in the middle of a fight and Sanzoku waddled over to Naruto, climbing his back and resting on his shoulder. What now, boss? What do we do? It seems we have 2 parties to plan for Sanzoku. I'll need you at your best today. You and I are going to be in a real battle together. But first, I have something I have to do. The red panda nodded and hopped off Naruto's shoulders. The blonde boy clapped his hands together and held them before his face. No one interrupt me. I'm going to try to attempt something I've never done before. Jiraiya quirked an eyebrow and smirked. And what would that be, Naruto? I'm going to try to use the green to find out what we're up against. I'll need quiet though, since I'm going to be concentrating hard. Please don't interrupt me until I come out of my trance and don't touch me, no matter what happens. Before anyone could protest, he shut his eyes and entered into a deep trance, his breathing slowing, as he contacted the source that only he could command. It was totally different in this realm of existence. Everything was so alive, death nothing but a nuisance since everything was cyclical. Naruto had never directly attempted to contact the source of the green before, but now was as good a time as any. But everything was so peaceful in this realm. If it weren't for the fact that he was incorporeal, he would have liked to have stayed forever. He wandered through a forest that was too beautiful and serene to ever be real or exist in his world. There were no animals, but there was enough life to let him know that the forest itself breathed. His trek was over when he came to a small, open shrine with a lone person sitting cross-legged on a red pillow. Naruto approached the shrine cautiously and found the person to be a man, ancient-looking, with a white beard that flowed down and over the steps leading up to him. The man had no hair on his head and wore white robes that covered everything. The only piece of color on him was a green sash that crossed from his right shoulder to his left hip. The ancient man cracked an eye open and gave Naruto a small smile. Not quite what you were expecting, huh boy? Naruto knelt before the shrine and bowed low, his forehead touching the ground, before looking back up. No, Ancient One, I did not. I did not know what to expect truthfully. The old man chuckled and started to rise from his position. Before Naruto could move to help him, branches came from the trees and helped him to stand. He cracked his back and wrapped his beard around his waist, looping the end through his sash and stepped carefully down the steps. Once on ground level, a root reached out to him and snapped itself off at the end, making a gnarled cane for him. The old man smiled at Naruto and beckoned for the boy to rise and follow. They walked into a field that seemed to have every flower imaginable, colors of every hue and 1,000 scents assaulted his eyes and tickled his nostrils. Naruto looked out upon the field and wished that he could take back some of the flowers to Temari. Some, he was sure, had never had mortal eyes laid on them before. The old man coughed and Naruto turned his attention back to the smiling Ancient One. I believe that you have done much with the power I allow you to wield, child. Not many have ever handled the burden of the green as well as you. Even your own mother never managed to contact me. You continue to surprise me, boy. My name is Naruto, not boy. The old man laughed heartily at his statement and tapped his cane on the ground. Very well then. Naruto it is. My name is inconsequential. To you, I am simply Master or Ancient One. My name is lost to history and there is no reason for it to ever be known again. The old man leaned his head back slightly and took a whiff of the air, inhaling deeply. Do you find this field of flowers calming, Naruto? I do. It always calms me when I am troubled. Naruto nodded and took a whiff as well. It is lovely. Very peaceful. High, as the green should be. Peaceful. Now, what is it that you needed that would make you try to contact me? Naruto had winced when the old man said peaceful. He knew the old man knew why he was there, but it had to be said. I wish to use the green to help subdue and spy on my enemies. Will you allow this? The old man's eyes cut to him and to Naruto. It felt like all life in the area died. Why would I allow my power to be used in such a manner? It is to be used for life and the growth of the world, not for destruction. I don't seek destruction. I seek to protect my village and my loved ones. By sowing seeds of chaos? By launching a preemptive attack. We can't always afford to be passive, no matter how much we want to be. Sometimes, you have to attack first to ensure your survival. The old man turned away from him and put both hands down on the cane. The green isn't meant to be used in that manner. Lots of things aren't supposed to be used the way they are. Living prisons shouldn't exist either, but they do. The old man nodded and turned back to face Naruto. That is true. Your body was not intended to house a demon, or was it? Perhaps it was your fate. I don't believe in fate. That's a cheap way out for the man who has lost all hope. The old man's eyes turned up with his smile and the landscape burst into color again. And yet, you believed so much that you were destined to be Hokage. I wanted to be Hokage through hard work. Not fate. If you don't believe in fate, how do you live? I live for the future. If you live for the future, how can you live for the present? I love someone and she is my present and future. What made you want to wield my power? The thought that I might do good with it. The old man leaned more heavily on the cane and sighed loudly. That you would do good with it. Blood does not water plants. Naruto narrowed his eyes and set his jaw. And a dead gardener does not tend a garden. The old man threw his head back and laughed to the heavens, his rumbling like thunder in the stillness of the realm. When he had calmed down once again, he opened his eyes and looked upon Naruto kindly. You were indeed a good choice to wield my power. Do what you will with it. It is yours to command. And take care of the one you love. Mighty trees from small acorns grow. Is that a riddle? It is a bit of advice. Never lose that indomitable spirit of yours. You make it sound like this is the last time we shall speak. The old man hobbled over to Naruto and handed him the cane, and took several careful steps back. Naruto looked down at the cane and then back to the man. What is the meaning of this? The old man smiled again and cracked his back. It has been millennia since I took up the mantle of protector of the green. My burden is finally ended. My power will pass to you. Naruto's eyes widened and he stepped forward, holding out the cane. I don't want this power forever. The old man held up a hand and stepped forward, putting a gnarled hand on either of Naruto's shoulders. This was decided long before your birth. The green does not care what you think, Naruto. It chooses its wielder based on its own needs and wants. You were destined to wield this power. It's yours to do with as you please. But it doesn't matter. It's yours. Now go and live your life without regrets and leave an old man to slip into eternity and see his loved ones once again. Do not lose that fire in your belly, Namikaze Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened to their fullest and his voice came out in a whisper. How did you know my name? The green knows many things. Now leave an old man in peace, Namikaze Naruto. Naruto faded out and watched as the old man began to disappear, wisps of his being fading into the ever-expanding field of flowers. The look on his face was one of pure bliss and happiness that his burden was over. Goodbye, Ancient One. May your soul find peace. Temari watched as Naruto closed his eyes and then, not 30 seconds later, she felt a large rush of power. She whirled around to see what the others thought and saw that none of them had even felt it. They didn't notice. She turned back to Naruto and caught his eyes opening again. She guessed it was her imagination. Naruto turned his head slowly to Temari and gave her a small smile. Hey. How long was I out? About 30 seconds. Naruto nodded and stood up, offering her his hand. Temari took it and he pulled sharply so that she rocketed off the sand. That old man worked quick. I guess he was right. Temari quirked her eyebrow and touched his arm. Old man? Right about what? Naruto smiled at her and pulled her in for a hug. I was just told to appreciate the present, Temari-chan. Now stand back and let's see if I can do this. Temari stepped back to the others and they all watched as Naruto slowly raised his right arm, outstretched over the sand. A piece of wood rocketed up out of the sand and into his hand. The group watched as he gripped it tightly and faced them. To them, it was just a gnarled piece of what looked like an old root, a knot at the top, the entire thing nearly 5 feet long. Temari, however, could see the wisps of green power rolling off of it. Naruto grinned and turned back to the desert, jamming the staff of wood into the sand and clapped his hands together in front of his face while leaning against the embedded staff. Temari touched his shoulder and he cracked an eye open. Naruto, what are you doing? We don't have time for you to meditate twice. He grinned and closed his eye again. Don't worry, Temari-chan. I'm just giving our unwanted guests a little welcoming present. They all wondered what he could possibly mean. The two robed figures moved across the desert in no particular hurry. The larger one had sworn that he had seen a rat running across the desert and then poof out of existence, but his shorter companion chalked it up to heat stroke and the fact that he was used to having water near. Kisame took the bamboo hat off his head and wiped his extremely sweaty brow. He hated the desert, absolutely, positively hated it. Unlike Itachi, he wasn't genetically predisposed to being cool as a cucumber all the time. He mopped his brow again and put the hat back on, huffing loudly. God damn it, I hate the desert. I've always hated this place. Why did we have to come again? Because the QB is my responsibility and you are my partner. Now quit complaining and move. Kisame grumbled under his breath and took another step forward, only for something pointy to erupt under the spot where his foot would have been. He leapt back and pulled Samahata from his back in one swift motion. Itachi was several feet away, looking for their assailant. Kisame narrowed his eyes at what had tried to gut him. It was a tree root. And there was only one person alive who could command tree roots. That Yamato bastard is around here somewhere. No. Kisame blinked, but kept his guard up. No? No. It's not Yamato. He has to have pre-existing plant life to command it. This was born from nothing. This is different. A stalk of thorns erupted near Itachi and dragged across his face, leaving a line of blood. He put his hand up to touch the blood and looked at the droplets on his fingertips. It seems that we have an unknown variable here, Kisame. I believe it would be prudent that we observe from here on out. We will not attack. We will watch and we will wait. As soon as the words left his mouth, the ground exploded in a deluge of greenery. Limbs wound around each other and vines snaked around huge trees that came from nowhere. Kisame ended up wedged in between two massive limbs from a tree that looked like it had come from the forests around Konoha. He snarled and cut the limbs in two with Samehada, looking for Itachi. He soon found his smaller companion, hanging upside down by his ankles, which were wrapped in vines. Kisame laughed at his stoic partner's expression, and his laughter only deepened when he heard Itachi grunt. I believe that our assailant is someone we know, and they have a most odd sense of humor. Once Itachi was free, the two stepped back and blinked owlishly at the expanse of trees and vines that shouldn't exist in the desert. It was like an oasis just sprang up from nowhere. Remember, Kisame, we will just watch. I believe that Pain-sama would want us to report on this development. Naruto-kun will always be around. Kisame nodded and shouldered Samehada again and grumbled. Too bad the bastard couldn't have made a river instead. Naruto grinned at the information he just gleaned from the green. So the two had opted to observe instead, eh? Perfect. Perhaps he could get some information on Akatsuki while they were watching him. This small power from the green was pretty cool. No matter at the moment. He had a former comrade to torture. Sasuke was obviously disconcerted with his situation at the moment. Karen was being especially annoying at the moment and Juga was twitching, trying to keep his urges under control. Suigetsu, for once, was not antagonizing the girl and for that he was grateful. The closer they got to Suna, the more excited he got at the thought of seeing his old friend again. He had long ago made up his mind that Manjikyu needed to be his, regardless of the personal cost. His defeat at the hands of his brother was too humiliating. He needed the Manjikyu. Killing Naruto was the only way. He had heard in their travels that the Jinchuriki had left Konoha and now resided in Suna. That had been his first indication that something was amiss in Konoha. The blonde idiot would never have just given up his dream without a good reason unless he was cast out. That was a possibility. His time away from any village at all had seriously diminished Sasuke's information and he knew he was sorely lacking. This little venture could cost him much if he wasn't careful. It wasn't like he had any allies outside the three traveling with him. Betraying everyone you ever came into contact with made people a little leery of trusting you after all. As Karen latched onto his arm again, Sasuke growled and thrust her away to the side. She squealed when she landed and shrieked when several thorny vines erupted from the ground where she had been standing. Suigetsu immediately began to hack at them, but they only grew more. Sasuke pulled his sword from his back, looking for the only one he knew could do such a thing. Show yourself, Yamato, you tree-hugging bastard. Show yourself. Of course, Yamato never answered and the group constantly had to dodge the vines that tried to ensnare them. Juga was the first to be caught, his limited thought capacity not up to dealing with vines that were seemingly sentient. Karen was next, strung upside down, screaming and kicking. Suigetsu was tiring quickly. There was only so much hacking and slashing he could do before he would tire. And trying to cut his teammates loose was fast becoming a chore he could do without. He missed a swipe at a huge tree branch and was knocked unconscious when the very same branch wrapped around itself and struck him in the side of the head. Sasuke growled under his breath and dodged again. He hated that Yamato bastard even more now. He sliced another vine, trying to wrap around him and leapt back when he heard an inhuman screech and turned to see a giant Venus flytrap behind him. The thing spread its maw and lunged for him. He rolled to the side and scrambled to his feet. He had to put some distance between him and the plant. As soon as that was accomplished, he flashed through hand seals as quickly as possible and unleashed a fiery dragon at the Venus flytrap. It squealed in protest before burning to a cinder and collapsing upon the ground. Sasuke breathed a sigh of relief and was about to set his companions free when the foliage around him withered and crumbled to nothingness. His team fell to the ground with 3 loud thuds and Sasuke sheathed his sword. He'd have to wait for them to wake up before they could leave. Looking out over the withering vines, he thought he saw a pattern to them. Sending chakra to his legs, he leapt into the air, his eyes narrowing and his teeth grinding together when he saw the message. "Welcome to yo Suna asshole." Sasuke landed on the ground and slapped Karen awake. They had to go now, while he still had his anger. This Yamato prick was going to die by his sword if nothing else. Naruto smirked and straightened up, stepping away from his staff, before grabbing it up and holding it in his hand. The gnarled wood felt oh so familiar and comforting in his grasp, and he twirled it lightly before jamming it back into the ground. He looked around to his friends and grinned. Kisame and Itachi are coming to observe what happens, and Sasuke is livid and is out for blood. I think my little message to him bruised his delicate ego. Temari blinked and put her hands on her hips. What the hell are you talking about? Naruto grinned and relayed to them what all he had done to throw off their guests. Several chuckles and guffaws later at the expense of the missing means, everyone got serious. It was time to get ready to go on the offensive. Shikamaru came to the forefront and began to outline his plan in the sand. Alright, since we don't have to worry about Akatsuki apparently, then we should just focus on Sasuke and his little buddies. Now then, Suigetsu is a water user, so Kakashi should take him on with right Tanjutsus. This Karen chick should go to Sakura. The Jugo guy could probably go to Lee and me. Sasuke is up to Naruto. You 4 should pick out who you want to back you up. After much deliberation, the groups were still not decided and everyone had just agreed to jump in when they saw an opening, letting the designated ninjas try their hand first. Naruto was just about to crack another joke when he felt something headed his way and ducked the shuriken that had been aimed at his head. He turned and found a sight he hadn't seen in quite a while. A haggard Team Hibi stood before the gathered ninjas, with a fuming Sasuke at the forefront. Karen darted her eyes back and forth nervously as she assessed the situation. They were outnumbered at least 3-1 with the assembled group and there was still the entire Suna force behind the wall. Why in the hell did she follow this crazy bastard again? Oh yeah, she thought he was cute. Sasuke-sama, I think a tactical retreat might be in order. We're heavily outnumbered. Sasuke glared at her, a silent order to shut up. I'm not leaving until I have that eye. It is mine by right and all I have to do is kill that idiot. I've beaten him once. I can do it again. But Sasuke-sama, we're heavily outnumbered, I said no. Naruto narrowed his eyes and stepped forward, away from the group. Sasuke took note of the staff and put his hand on the hilt of his sword. Have you broken a hip or something, dope? Or do you just like the feel of that wood in your hand? Actually, it's a gift from a very ancient sage. I happen to like it. Now, what say you come quietly and I won't hurt you? Sasuke sneered and spit in Naruto's direction. Still intent on bringing me back for that pink-haired harpy, Adobe? I thought you might have learned by now. I'm totally fine with maiming you and handing you over, Sasuke. Perhaps you didn't notice, but there have been significantly less missions to save you since the Akatsuki fiasco. I could care less about your welfare. We're not 12 anymore. Sasuke pulled his sword and nodded his head to the left. What say we take this over there and finish what we started all those years ago? We never had a definitive finish. Naruto cracked his neck and swept his arm in an encompassing motion. After you, you rotten bastard. The two disappeared and Sasuke's team looked toward the rest of the ninjas, Karen fearfully, Suigetsu warily, Jugo hungrily. Sakura cracked her knuckles and sneered. Looks like we get to relieve a little stress after all, huh, Kakashi-sensei? It would appear so. I call dibs on the water user. I have history with that sword. He's all yours. I want the red-haired bitch. The rest looked at Jugo and his rapidly declining mood and obvious dementia. Gaara shrugged, his sand coming to life. Guess we get leftovers. Shikamaru sighed. Why did he bother with plans at all? Naruto and Sasuke stood facing each other, neither moving. This battle had been a long time coming and it made both nostalgic. Sasuke took a deep breath and smirked. You know, the last time we faced off like this, I nearly killed you. The last time we faced each other, I vividly remember you nearly pissing your pants every time I stood back up. Sasuke snarled and made to draw his sword, but was stopped by a hand. He turned his head to find Naruto standing behind him. His eyes turned back to the front and the Naruto standing before him waved and poofed out of existence. Now Sasuke-chan. We have admirers here. We need to go all out. Don't be so hasty. Sasuke elbowed him in the gut and Naruto grunted before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Another clone. Show yourself, you gutless wonder. Stop hiding behind your clones. Naruto sighed and Sasuke spun to face him. He noted that the blonde had gotten faster. Not nearly fast enough, however. Sasuke took several deep breaths and closed his eyes, reopening them to reveal the Sharingan. Now let's see you run. Kisame and Itachi sat perched on a sand dune not far from the scene, silently watching the goings-on. Neither was impressed so far. The Kyuubi brat's playing with your brother. He's toying with him. Yes, he is. I wonder how Sasuke will react when he finds out. I bet he flips out and pulls on the curse seal. I know he will. My foolish little brother has always taken the path of least resistance to power. He won't hesitate to use the seal, especially when Naruto-kun begins to win. So what's the plan? Itachi sat for a moment, pondering. When Naruto-kun starts to win, we'll move in and make our presence known. We can't try to take him because he has eyes on him besides ours, but I would love to see my brother's expression. Kisame grinned and shifted Samahata. This could be fun. I hope it's an entertaining show.